Beneath Chen Mang's feet, resources were piled up like mountains. But strangely enough, the richer he got, the more terrifying it felt. Because from the moment the Kasa civilization compressed everything into level 10 resources, their value was no longer just a countable number, but a heavy weight pressing directly on the mind. A piece of pitch black or semi-transparent, with a smoldering fire burning inside. It was as beautiful as a work of art, and worth as much as an entire civilization. 9 quadrillion units of copper ore. 9 quadrillion units of iron ore. With just the press of a button, the planetary train would enter a new era. Every single component would simultaneously upgrade to level 200. Its power would undergo a complete metamorphosis, and its defense would reach unimaginable heights. This was a moment he would never forget for the rest of his life. But then, when the final layer of armor lit up and the number 200 appeared, the ultimate reward felt suspiciously anticlimactic. A single step to the peak. And right after that, a cold chill ran down his spine. The real challenge for him was probably just beginning. Please continue to follow Chen Mang as we step into the next episode. All units, proceed to the designated combat zones immediately. The operation begins now. In the blink of an eye, Chen Mang noticed that every surveillance camera on the streets, inside the stores, and even on the nearby utility poles went completely dead. Not just in this area, but the entire city's surveillance system went completely silent. It was wiped so clean that it felt almost too professional. At the same time, heavy machine guns emerged one after another from the rooftops of high-rise buildings, utility poles, and above store signs, from every unimaginable angle. The pitch-black barrels began to spin slowly, cold and ruthless. Clearly, a massive cache of weapons had been hidden in every corner of this city, just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The next moment, bang, bang, bang. Deafening gunfire tore through the night, shattering the city's false sense of peace. Countless bullets rained down like a metal storm, completely engulfing the guards who had just arrived to clear the area. When the gunfire finally died down, all that remained were scattered chunks of flesh and a street torn up beyond recognition. Simply put, the scene was not for the faint of heart, and definitely not suitable for anyone trying to hold someone accountable. 55 minutes left. Chen Mang glanced down at his watch, then casually tossed Little Green into the air. His tone was as light as if he were calling for dinner. Let's go. He had to make the most of his time. His target was never just one auction house. These 55 minutes were his free-for-all, but once the time was up, he absolutely had to run. Because this was a planet directly under the Kasa civilization, located right in their absolute core territory. Poking the hornet's nest here and being slow about it would only lead to one outcome: death, and a very messy one at that. Immediately after, Little Green rapidly expanded in midair. Its massive body grew until it blotted out the sky, reaching a size comparable to several football fields combined. Under the dumbfounded gazes of pedestrians who hadn't even processed what was happening, it opened its blood-red maw and swallowed the entire palace like auction house whole. No negotiations, no paperwork, and definitely no bidding. Then, Little Green quickly shrank back down and obediently returned to Chen Mang's arms, looking like it had just finished a rather hefty midnight snack. Chen Mang didn't need to know exactly where his target item was stored, nor did he need to storm every floor of the auction house to search for it. As long as he confirmed it was inside the building, that was enough. He could leave the rest to Little Green. He could take his time searching once they were back on the train. After all, the entire building was already in his hands. He turned to look at the pedestrians who were still frozen in shock, smiled, and gave a polite wave, as if he had just done a small good deed. Then, he casually strolled away. Right after, the heavy machine guns on the high-rises behind him emerged once again, unleashing a devastating barrage on all the pedestrians in the area. This ensured that no faces or specific information would be leaked. To put it bluntly, this was an extremely thorough cleanup job, so thorough that even if the Kasa civilization wanted to investigate, they'd only be able to stare at the craters and sigh. In the blink of an eye, Chen Mang's side of the operation was wrapped up neatly. But it seemed that Fully Ufulu's team over in Extreme Radiation City had run into a slight problem. Captain, the nominal strategic reserve of Extreme Radiation City is 10 trillion units of iron ore and 10 trillion units of copper ore. but the actual current reserve is 0. Yes, 0. Completely empty. Chen Meng walked down the street, listening to little AI's report, and replied calmly. Tell Fulu to move on to the next city. If there's still time, prioritize the high-value locations we marked. Understood. Although it sounded a bit absurd, this was still within his expectations. Chen Meng had long heard about the deep-rooted corruption within the Kasa civilization. He just didn't expect them to not just embezzle half, but to wipe the slate completely clean. Their methods were truly ruthless. But it didn't matter. There were 17 cities in total. He refused to believe that all 17 had been plucked so clean that not even a single hair was left. At the same time, on the Gemini planet, city number 4, the group personally led by Fulu, the leader of the Furia Pirate Syndicate, was riding several off-road motorcycles, speeding toward the warehouse under the cover of night. With such a massive commotion and zero attempt at stealth, they naturally alerted the guards early on. The warehouse's outer defense system was quickly activated. Automated gun barrels aimed straight at Fulu and his crew, ready to open fire at any moment. But very quickly, under the horrified gazes of the guards, those guns suddenly swiveled around, aiming right at them. And then, they unleashed a hail of bullets. Bang, 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 bang. The gunfire shook the night sky, but the speed of Fulu and his crew didn't slow down in the slightest. By the time they drove straight into the warehouse, the outer defense perimeter was already littered with corpses. From start to finish, they hadn't even fired a single shot. It was all thanks to Boss AI silently paving the way. The surrounding traffic had also been forcefully locked down, ensuring no one could get close. The automated alarm system had been intercepted. Law enforcement hadn't received any alerts. No one would be bothering them anytime soon. When Fulu kicked open the warehouse doors, he immediately froze in his tracks. Staring at the scene before him, he subconsciously gulped. Inside the warehouse, high-grade iron ore and high-grade copper ore were piled up in massive mounds. A quick glance showed it was packed to the brim, looking exactly like a bumper harvest. The metallic gleam reflecting off the lights was so dazzling it made his heart race. Boss Mang's heist this time is seriously way too massive. When it comes to being a pirate, Boss Mang is truly my grandmaster. Fulu suddenly had an epiphany. He had always called himself a pirate, but his entire life's haul combined couldn't even match this single warehouse. Meanwhile, Chen Meng had never claimed to be a pirate, yet a casual heist of his yielded more than Fulu's entire career. And targets like this? There were 17 of them in this operation. He was just leading one small squad. Thinking of this, Fulu could only sigh, feeling a severe blow to his professional pride. Get to work, he grinned, waving his hand to signal. The subordinates behind him immediately hauled forward several refrigerators, then pulled out a massive vacuum cleaner temporarily cobbled together by Taiyu and Boss AI. Looking at this setup, anyone who didn't know better would think they were here for a year-end spring cleaning. They aimed the octopus tentacle-shaped suction nozzle into the warehouse and slammed the button. Countless pieces of iron and copper ore instantly flew into the air, sucked into the vacuum cleaner, and then directly transferred into the planetary train via the refrigerators. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water and drifting clouds. It went so flawlessly that one might suspect this was just an internal drill. Meanwhile, gunfire continued to ring out inside the warehouse, each shot precisely taking down the remaining personnel. They were clearly here to clean out the warehouse, but they conveniently cleaned up the witnesses, too. Once all the resources in the warehouse had been vacuumed up, the iris chip implanted in Fulu's eye flashed with a new stream of information. Resource inventory complete. Total: 10 trillion units of iron ore, 10 trillion units of copper ore. Please eliminate the remaining hostile forces. Very quickly, a floor plan of the warehouse appeared on his iris chip. Several blinking red dots showed up in a few blind spots. These were the blind spots of the automated turrets, places the guns couldn't reach. They needed to handle these manually. This is my first time operating with a god's eye view like this. Fulu couldn't help but marvel. He hadn't been in this line of work for just a day or two. Even though he had never pulled off a heist this massive, he had done plenty of similar jobs. It's just that he had never seen an operation go this smoothly. The distance between friend and foe was displayed clearly down to the meter. The feeling of utterly crushing the enemy through sheer informational superiority was incredibly satisfying. It was like turning on wall hacks without the fear of getting banned. In another direction, the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secret Pavilion was leading a group of sect disciples. Riding their flying swords low to the ground under the cover of night, they rapidly approached the resource warehouse in City Number 8. However, before they even arrived, he heard the dense sound of gunfire echoing from afar. As they got closer, the scene before him made his expression shift slightly. A group of people dressed in black and wearing masks were wielding guns, surrounding the guards outside the warehouse. The gunfire crackled continuously like firecrackers. At a glance, there were over 100 of them. Clearly, someone had beaten them to the punch. Stealing our job? The pavilion master's face darkened. He refused to accept his mission failing in such a manner. With almost no hesitation, he let out a low shout. The spiritual energy within his body erupted violently, instantly condensing into a massive 8 trigrams formation in midair. Immediately after, the 8 trigrams formation fully materialized. Flying swords carrying terrifying pressure appeared all at once, sprouting like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. In an instant, thousands of flying swords transformed into a torrential rain of blades, blanketing the entire area. With just a single strike, an area of nearly 1,000 meters was leveled to the ground. This was the true allure of a cultivation civilization. No need for a train. Just relying on one's own body could unleash such terrifying destructive power. In this area, other than them, there were no survivors left. Without the intervention of trains, in terms of sheer individual strength, who could possibly match them? Kicking open the warehouse doors, a massive stockpile of resources revealed itself inside. The pavilion master gave a soft shout. Surging spiritual energy poured out, wrapping around all the iron ore, pulling it into a suspended silver river in the air, and rapidly funneling it into the refrigerator. This refrigerator was a level 200 unit sent to this city by Chen Meng. When they retreated later, they had to take it with them. After all, it was made from iron ore. Leaving it behind would be a complete waste. Very quickly, the inventory was finished. Resource inventory complete. Total, 5 trillion units of iron ore, 5 trillion units of copper ore. No survivors remaining. Please proceed to the next mission objective. Only half. The pavilion master's expression turned a bit ugly, but he didn't stop to dwell on it. Now wasn't the time to investigate the cause. He had to quickly retreat according to Boss AI's instructions and head to the next target. The total operation time was only 55 minutes. 7 minutes had already passed. Only 48 minutes left. Everything else could wait until later. The commotion seems a bit too big. City Number 8, on the top floor of an office building. A middle-aged man stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the flames rising from the suburban warehouse. He paced back and forth with an anxious expression. He knew very well that the higher-ups were truly cracking down this time. He only had 7 days left to cover up the deficit. But a deficit this massive, he simply couldn't cover it. The money was already spent. Where was he supposed to find the funds to make up for it? According to the old rules, if you can't cover it up, you burn it down. One fire wipes the books clean. Tonight, he had sent people to attack the suburban warehouse. On the surface, it looked like a success, but deep down, he felt increasingly uneasy. I just hope everything wraps up smoothly. Meanwhile, in City Number 9, at a suburban warehouse, an elderly man, trembling as his subordinates supported him, pushed open the warehouse doors. Looking at the massive stockpile of resources inside, his eyes were filled with heartache. To cover up this deficit, he had drained his entire family fortune, barely managing to scrape together 20 trillion units of resources. Though it was exhausting and heartbreaking, at this moment, he felt incredibly relieved. He was even looking forward to the inspection 7 days from now. Who knows, he might even get rewarded. Cover up a deficit? Once the deficit was filled, he would absolutely never admit to embezzling. Instead, he would say, there was never any deficit to begin with. He was an honest official. It hadn't been easy. The old man stood at the warehouse entrance, looking at the mountain of high-grade iron ore, a smile creeping onto his lips. Sitting in this position, one had to understand a simple truth. Money can be earned back, but if you lose your official post, you lose everything. The higher-ups had made up their minds. There was no point in stubbornly resisting. You couldn't win. But right at that moment, deafening gunfire suddenly erupted outside the warehouse. Before the old man could even react, a massive hail of bullets tore straight toward the entrance, sweeping up everyone present. Someone's robbing the place. The thought flashed through his mind. As unbelievable as it was, someone actually dared to strike at the Casa civilization. They were even bolder than he was. Cursing inwardly, he immediately turned and ran deeper into the warehouse. But his body was simply too old and frail. Before he could even take 2 steps, he stumbled and fell to the ground. A burning sensation instantly hit him from behind. The moment the bullet pierced his body, childhood memories suddenly flashed through his mind, those carefree days of the past. His biggest regret before dying was that he should have restored his body to its peak condition before coming here. Maybe then, he could have escaped. The attack came too fast. So fast that he didn't even have time to summon his train. To avoid drawing attention, he hadn't taken his train. Instead, he had sneaked out under the cover of night, bringing only a few trusted aides to transport the resources. And because of that, he had almost no armed forces to defend himself. The next moment, the doors were kicked wide open. The patriarch of a major clan from the Xuanwu civilization, wielding a massive hammer, strode into the warehouse. He glanced at the corpses scattered across the floor, then looked at the massive stockpile of resources at the back of the warehouse. He grinned. Boss AI, mission accomplished smoothly. Time to collect the goods. Tonight was destined to be anything but peaceful. At the City Hall of City Number 3, a middle-aged man was sitting rather leisurely on the sofa in his study. Holding a warm cup of coffee, he took a slow sip. He understood very well that the Casa civilization was about to undergo a massive upheaval. The higher-up stance this time was incredibly firm. No matter what connections or backers you had, it was useless. 7 days from now, if the strategic resource reserves were found to be inaccurate, everyone involved would be dealt with according to the law. No mercy, no saving face. Surely, many people were losing sleep over this right now, but he wasn't panicking in the slightest. He sat there, quietly savoring the taste of his coffee, feeling that this moment was truly warm and natural. He was quite a coward, and yes, he hadn't embezzled a single thing. It sounded unbelievable, because an honest official within the Casa civilization was as rare as an endangered species. Sitting in this position and not embezzling? Hardly anyone would believe it. Forget the Casa civilization. Pick any civilization at random, and who would dare beat their chest and claim there were no corrupt officials? Or to put it more bluntly, who would dare say they didn't have at least a little greed in them? So what if they embezzled? It wasn't like they weren't doing their jobs. It was just that the salary for this position was never enough. If the higher-ups wouldn't give it to them, they had to take it themselves. He understood that mindset perfectly and even found it reasonable. He was just too cowardly to actually do it. The strategic resource reserves of this city? He truly hadn't dared to touch even a single unit of iron ore. And precisely because of that cowardice, while everyone else was on pins and needles, he could sit here calmly drinking his coffee. Being an honest official was better. At least he had peace of mind. But after an unknown amount of time, a piercing alarm suddenly rang out in the study. Even his wristwatch vibrated violently, the screen flashing red continuously. It was an emergency call from the chief of law enforcement. Hello. The middle-aged man frowned. What's going on? Mayor, our city's strategic resource warehouse has been robbed. All the guards are dead. The warehouse has been wiped clean. What? He shot up from the sofa, his eyes filled with despair and disbelief. After a long moment, his entire body went limp, and he collapsed back into the chair. It's over. It's all over. Which son of a bitch did this? They didn't do it earlier, they didn't do it later, they just had to do it right now? He wanted to say that he was truly an honest official, that the warehouse had simply been robbed. But would the higher-ups believe him? Believe him, my ass. When the time came, there would be 8 or 10,000 people using that exact same excuse. It would be a miracle if anyone believed him. 1 hour later, the AIs of the 17 cities had regained full administrative control. Sirens echoed across the Gemini planet. All nearby wormhole entrances were forcibly locked down. At the same time, a beam of blue light shot straight from the planet's core out into space. Areas where wormholes could normally be constructed were temporarily sealed off. Even if someone wanted to use a train to create a wormhole and escape, it was no longer possible. The entire Gemini planet was under absolute lockdown. The military began a massive, sweeping operation. Countless warships deployed simultaneously, conducting a thorough search of all the cities. The mayors of the 17 cities had also been gathered, standing together before the planetary governor. Everyone's expression was grim, but no one spoke a word. In their hearts, each of them was secretly calculating and speculating. This incident was far too bizarre, and it happened at such a sensitive time. Robbed by pirates? How is that possible? Someone definitely chose this method to balance their books. But they didn't dare rob just their own warehouse, because that would be too obvious. So they just went ahead and robbed everyone's. Well, right then, one of the mayors coughed dryly, breaking the silence. Since it's come to this, let's just be honest with each other. Whoever balanced their books, step forward. Let's talk this out together. After all, choosing to balance the books this way at a time like this is way too risky. Without a reasonable excuse, it's going to be very hard to explain. His warehouse was already empty, and now it had been robbed. It conveniently helped him balance his books. Our current goal is to figure out a countermeasure. This crude way of balancing the books is basically treating the higher-ups like idiots. Balance the books, my ass. The mayor of city number 3 jumped up, his eyes bloodshot as he roared in fury. I don't care who balanced their books. Give me back my strategic resources. I'm an honest official. Did I need you to balance my books? Did I fucking need you to balance my books? If you want to dig your own graves, fine. But why drag me down with you? All right. The planetary governor, sitting at the head of the table, sighed. Is there anyone here who would dare say they aren't an honest official? It's come to this, so let's drop the act. Let's be honest with each other. The higher-ups are taking a very hard stance this time. I'll say it first. I didn't do it, and it definitely couldn't have been me. Not you. The mayor of city number 7 had a dark expression, spitting out his words one by one. I just fucking covered my deficit, and you bastards balanced my books? I really want to balance the books on your entire families. Give it back to me right fucking now, or I'm seriously going to lose my mind. The mayor of city number 8 sat perfectly still, like an old monk in deep meditation, his eyes focused on his nose focused on his heart. He had indeed sent people to balance the books, but they weren't strong enough. They only managed to balance the books for his city and 3 others. Up until now, he hadn't received any news. They had completely lost contact. Clearly, they had run into someone else who was also balancing the books. It was just that the other party's methods were far superior, capable of balancing the books for all 17 cities at once. The only person with that kind of capability was probably the planetary governor. Everyone knew the planetary governor embezzled the most. But at a time like this, no one dared to open their mouth and point the finger directly at him. Things were really getting lively this time. With so many people dragged down into the mud, it actually made him feel safer. There's always safety in numbers. He'd just wait and see how the higher-ups handled it. After all, the law rarely punishes the masses. Not to mention, they were in wartime and needed to stabilize the home front. How could they easily purge a massive swath of high-ranking officials? But wait. Looking around, why was one mayor missing? Could he have already fled? At this moment, everyone else also noticed the anomaly. They were indeed missing one person. It was definitely that guy. He did it and ran. I'm seriously going to fucking lock down the Gemini planet. The mayor of city number 7 roared, his face incredibly dark. Don't let a single mosquito escape. We have to get this batch of resources back. Give me back my innocence. Right now, he was the angriest one of all. He had just finished covering his deficit, and the moment he turned his back, his books were balanced. They didn't balance them earlier, they didn't balance them later, they balanced them right after he had made up the difference. It would be a miracle if he didn't go crazy. Sharing his fury were 2 other mayors. All 3 of them had just covered their deficits, and now their books had been wiped clean. Their anger was boiling to the point of murder. As for the honest official, although he was also angry, he clearly wasn't driven to madness like these 3. Right at that moment, a train slowly flew out of a wormhole near the Gemini planet and landed directly in the center of a city hall. A group of armed men stepped off. Without a word, they marched straight into the meeting room, their cold gazes sweeping over the mayors and the planetary governor. "Inspector." The planetary governor stood up, his voice hoarse and solemn. "1 hour ago, an extremely serious incident occurred on the Gemini planet. A group of people robbed the strategic resource reserves of all 17 cities, causing a loss of approximately 170 trillion units of iron ore and 170 trillion units of copper ore. We have locked down the entire Gemini planet. We will definitely recover this batch of resources soon." The higher-ups people had arrived very quickly. This meant the matter was being treated with the utmost importance. If not handled well, it could very likely blow up into a massive problem. The young man leading the inspection team slowly walked up to the conference table. Standing next to the planetary governor, he patted his shoulder lightly and pressed him back into his seat. He narrowed his eyes, looking at each mayor present. After a long moment, he suddenly burst into laughter. "You guys are truly bold. Do you know what time it is? This is a moment that concerns the very survival of the Casa civilization. We are in the preparation phase for a decisive battle against the Zerg civilization. And yet, at a time like this, you're still playing these childish games? Robbed? How interesting. Do you believe that? Do you think I believe that? Do you think the Führer will believe that?" "It's the truth." The mayor of city number 7 stood up, his face looking awful. "Inspector, just investigate it, and you'll immediately know if we're telling the truth or not." "No need to investigate." The young man pulled out a warrant and slammed it onto the table, his voice calm. "Special times call for special measures. There's no time for a slow investigation. Your matter has already been reported directly to the Führer." He chuckled, a smile so cold it sent shivers down their spines. "It's quite amusing. I heard that when the Führer received the news, he couldn't help but laugh. Ever since Commander Lee began the expedition, it's been a very long time since the Führer last laughed. Even though he was laughing out of extreme fury, at least he laughed happily. He personally wrote this warrant. Gentlemen, have a safe trip to the afterlife." On the warrant placed in the middle of the table, there was only a single, glaringly red letter S. The strokes were as sharp as swords and sabers, piercing straight into the eyes of anyone who looked at it. The expression of the mayor of city number 7 instantly changed drastically, his eyes filled with terror. His voice trembled urgently. "I admit I embezzled in the past, but I paid it all back last night. Tonight, we were really robbed. Please investigate this thoroughly. I really..." Before he could finish his sentence, bang, a cold gunshot rang out in the meeting room. "Phew." The young man gently blew the smoke from the barrel. Looking at the middle-aged man collapsing into a pool of blood with an unwilling expression, he sneered. "Go explain it in hell. This is an order issued personally by the Führer. Daring to pull this stunt at a time like this. Using this kind of trick to balance the books, you're practically insulting the Führer's intelligence. If we don't make an example out of you, won't everyone else just follow suit?" At that moment, all the remaining mayors in the room, including the planetary governor, turned pale and desperately lunged for the door. The situation was crystal clear. The people sent by the higher-ups had absolutely no intention of investigating. They were here to execute people, and to do it very cleanly. Only the mayor of city number 3 didn't run. Stripped of all his previous composure, he stood up, dropped straight to his knees, raised both hands above his head in a military salute, and then looked up. Glaring fiercely at the inspector, he rasped out word by word. "Please investigate this thoroughly. I am truly an honest official. I have never embezzled even a single unit of iron ore. They were the ones balancing their books and dragged me down with them. I can withstand any investigation by the organization." The young man sneered and waved his hand, signaling his subordinates behind him to give chase. Without hesitation, they opened fire on the fleeing mayors. Deafening gunshots continuously rang out outside the meeting room. Then, he turned around and walked alone to the mayor of city number 3. Pressing the barrel of his gun directly against the man's forehead, he let out a soft sigh. "You guys really treat the Führer like a child. The Führer has tolerated you all for a very long time. Is there anyone who would actually step forward and admit they aren't an honest official? I'm sure you've prepared every possible countermeasure to deal with the inspection, haven't you? The books, the warehouse transfer records, everything done flawlessly, beyond reproach. But unfortunately, the Führer has no intention of investigating this time. He's had enough of you damn parasites. Have a safe trip. Remember to be an honest official in your next life. Bang! The trigger was pulled without a shred of mercy. The man's eyes slowly lost focus as his lifeless body collapsed into a pool of blood. Crimson quickly dyed his vision. His consciousness and life force faded rapidly. Thick darkness enveloped his entire world, and a tragic, despairing smile crept onto his lips. His final lingering thought was, in my next life, I must be a corrupt official. An honest official? Not even a dog would want to be one. If you don't eat the meat of a corrupt official but still take the beating meant for one, you might as well eat the meat first and take the beating later. Many things in this world are relative, like time and space. Or, for example, a smile. When a smile disappears from one person's face, it will inevitably appear on someone else's. In star system number 27 of the Casa Civilization Federation, aboard a planetary train silently drifting through space. Chun Mang was sitting in front of the control panel, the corners of his mouth turned up so high he couldn't even close them. He was in an incredibly good mood. Even the scallion oil noodles, served by Little Fong, tasted significantly better than usual. The haul from this operation far exceeded his initial expectations. In theory, the strategic resources of the 17 cities should have been 170 trillion units of iron ore and 170 trillion units of copper ore. Of course, that was just a number on paper. The reality was definitely much less. So Chun Mang's initial expectation was just to rake in 50 trillion units of iron ore and 50 trillion units of copper ore, which would already be a massive profit. After all, to dare embezzle half the strategic resources in an area so close to the Zerg civilization, it was a miracle they hadn't been wiped out completely. But the actual result was 90 trillion units of iron ore and 90 trillion units of copper ore. It exceeded his expectations by more than half. This massive amount of resources was enough to upgrade the train's armor to level 200 and upgrade all the 7 color quality components. Including the internal components of the train, everything could be pushed to level 200. Even the Agamemnon solar main cannon could be upgraded to level 200. The planetary train was officially entering the level 200 era. Everything at level 200. The emergency effects that other trains could barely even dream of touching would become the basic standard on the planetary train. They had retreated very quickly. What did the wormhole lockdown have to do with their refrigerators? They had long since escaped. It would be a miracle if they actually got caught. Next up would be a massive round of upgrades. After that, the planetary train would have enough strength to force its way into the battlefield where the two peak civilizations were clashing, taking bites of meat while continuing to grow. Once his strength increased fast enough, he would pull off a few more massive heists. From meddling to intervening, from intervening to manipulating, and finally, draining the lifeblood of both civilizations dry, making the planetary train stronger step by step, and then plunging even deeper into the vast universe. Step by step, everything was perfect. Right at that moment, ding! Chun Mang's wristwatch popped up with a notification from the Casa Daily, a news section he had set on high alert. He really wanted to know how the Casa civilization would classify this incident. Logically, they would definitely claim he stole 170 trillion units of iron ore and 170 trillion units of copper ore, conveniently pinning the entire blame on him. But Chun Mang didn't care. Reputation was the most useless thing. Resources in hand were what truly mattered. As long as they didn't know his identity and couldn't put a bounty on him, getting cursed at a few times was no big deal. However, when he saw the headline on the daily paper, Chun Mang's expression gradually turned bizarre. Casa Daily, 7 hours ago, the strategic resource reserves of 17 cities on the Gemini planet were destroyed and looted. According to preliminary statistics, total damages amount to hundreds of trillions of resource units, causing extremely severe losses to the Casa civilization. Upon investigation, this severe incident stemmed from the Führer's announcement a day prior, stating that a full inspection of all strategic resource reserves would be conducted in 7 days. Anyone found maliciously hoarding, or embezzling would be severely punished without mercy. Multiple corrupt officials on the Gemini planet colluded to orchestrate this heinous event, conspiring to use despicable and childish methods to balance their books in an attempt to evade legal punishment. This behavior was immediately exposed by the wise and mighty Führer, who was consequently enraged. 5 hours ago, all involved corrupt officials were dealt with according to the law and executed on the spot. At this critical juncture of the Casa Civilization's expedition, any act that harms the internal interests of the civilization makes one a sinner against the civilization. Chen Mang stared at the article, his expression growing increasingly peculiar. Something seemed a bit off. He had already prepared himself to become the ultimate scapegoat, shouldering the entire blame alone. As long as the resources were in his hands, being the scapegoat was fine. But it seemed this title of scapegoat was just too appealing. Everyone wanted a piece of it. The mayors of the 17 cities, and even the planetary governor, were all fighting to be the scapegoat, balancing the books for him. And the result was, he ended up being the one whose books were balanced for him. That actually works? Chen Mang couldn't help but mutter. He continued scrolling through the other news on the Casa Daily. He searched high and low but couldn't find any detailed investigation process. He suspected they probably hadn't investigated at all. After all, there were a few warehouses that were actually full. Those people truly hadn't embezzled. Among the officials, there had to be some good guys, right? Probably. Then, he saw the news about asset confiscations. Entire estates, and even the relatives of the involved families on other planets, had their assets seized. A total of hundreds of trillions of resources were recovered and entirely confiscated by the state. In a tiny corner of the paper, there was another piece of news that almost no one noticed. A famous war commentator of the Casa civilization, with the online handle Air Conditioner, committed suicide at home early yesterday morning. According to relatives, he suffered from severe depression. Chen Mang knew this guy. He had just read one of his articles yesterday. The content was extremely pessimistic about the expedition, spreading a lot of negative information, but the writing style was incredibly rational. A person like that, no matter how you looked at it, didn't seem the type to commit suicide. This news wasn't clean. Chen Mang slowly narrowed his eyes. He now understood why this incident was handled the way it was, and he also understood what the Führer of the Casa civilization was trying to do. You only need to see one falling leaf to know that autumn has arrived. It was very clear. This Führer was using assassinations, silencing tactics, and the consolidation of all resources to forcibly mobilize the entire internal strength of the Casa civilization, uniting them from top to bottom, preparing to fight to the death against the Zerg civilization. As for him, absolutely no one cared. And it was good that no one cared. It was best that no one cared. Chen Mang smirked, feeling highly satisfied. He was incredibly pleased with this haul. Most importantly, there were zero repercussions. Someone had balanced the books for him. So, the next step was very simple. Upgrade the train. A massive upgrade. After that, he would also join this war to make a killing. In a war of this scale, just taking a single bite of meat would yield more profit than robbing the Gemini planet. Just a tiny leak of their internal resources would be enough to leave him stuffing his face until grease dripped from his chin. It was a heist that would send the planetary train soaring into the heavens. The Zerg? Thinking about it carefully, they were nothing special. The Zerg's ability to consume resources was nowhere near his. The only thing he lacked was resources, and no matter how many resources there were, he could digest them instantly. This was an ability that no other civilization possessed, which also meant that his path of progression would never be a slow, step-by-step climb. Instead, he would normally stay stagnant, barely changing at all. But the moment he pulled off a massive heist, his strength would suddenly skyrocket, shooting straight up into the heavens in one go. If this were the stock market, he would be the absolute definition of a meme stock. Very good. He liked this style. Inside the planetary train, Chen Mang closed the Casa Daily on the screen, stood up, and walked to carriage number 2. Looking at the resources piled up like a small mountain inside the spatial gate, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. He spread his arms wide and took a deep breath. The air was filled with a fragrance. It was the smell of freedom, the smell of wealth. He absolutely loved this feeling. All the resources had long been synthesized into level 10 resources by the Casa civilization. Every single unit pulled out was worth 10 billion standard resource units. For example, the block of iron ore beneath his feet right now was a single unit of level 10 iron ore. He bent down, picked it up, and examined it closely in his hand. The appearance of level 10 iron ore was incredibly unique. It was pitch black yet slightly semi-transparent, and he could faintly see a fire burning within it. It didn't look like ore at all. It looked more like an exquisitely crafted work of art. Just holding it in his hand, he could feel the massive source of energy hidden within. Compared to level 9 iron ore, level 10 iron ore was more than just a step up in beauty. As for level 10 copper ore, it had a completely different appearance. It felt very light to hold. Overall, it was a golden brown color, with a faint red stream of gas slowly circulating inside. It looked a bit like the glass marbles he used to play with as a kid, just a high-end, motorized version. Just looking at it made it feel expensive. He had tested it at the crafting station, and the results showed that the highest it could synthesize was level 10. Level 11 iron ore or level 11 copper or simply didn't exist. Clearly, this was the absolute limit. Perhaps in the entire universe, the highest grade of or stopped at level 10. But the irony was, up until now, he had never actually encountered level 10 ore. The highest grade mine he had ever excavated only reached level 7. He hadn't even set foot in a level 8 mine. If he had to stretch it, then the level 9 mine and the cyber mine could probably only be considered a special case. 90 trillion units of copper ore and 90 trillion units of iron ore. Trillions, huh? Chen Meng muttered, looking at the massive stockpile of resources in front of him. This was a number so exaggerated that it was impossible to even grasp the concept of it. The last time he upgraded the train, which was when he received sponsorship from the Xuanwu civilization, he had only gotten 5 trillion units of iron ore. Back then, he had looked at the cost required to upgrade the train's armor from level 102 to level 200. The number was 30 trillion. At the time, he truly felt it was an astronomical figure. It was nearly impossible to gather that much in a short time. It would take at least a few years of accumulation. In the end, he only dared to spend 4 trillion units of iron ore upgrading the armor from level 102 to level 115. There was almost no fundamental change. The only clear feeling was that the resources drained as fast as water pouring into a river, vanishing right before his eyes. But now, things were different. Completely different. Now, he even felt that upgrading the armor to level 200 for only 30 trillion units of iron ore sounded unbelievably cheap. With it being this cheap, was the quality actually going to be okay? They always say you get what you pay for, after all. Most importantly, the armor was inherently the most resource-intensive component on the entire train, bar none. It even far exceeded the other 7-color quality components. Yet, even upgrading the armor to level 200 only required 30 trillion units of iron ore. In other words, the 90 trillion units of iron ore he currently had in his hands were enough to upgrade all the internal components of the planetary train to level 200. After today, the planetary train would officially enter an era where every single component reached level 200. In Chen Meng's life, this was definitely a moment worth remembering. So the next thing to do could be summed up in one word: upgrade. Taking a deep breath, he stood in the resource storage car, looking at the or covering the floor, and casually lit a cigarette. As the smoke drifted up, he suddenly spoke. "Little AI, how's the information gathering going on your end?" "Still gathering. We should have results very soon. Blueprints for 7-color quality firepower components that consume copper or weren't exactly scarce in the Casa Civilization Federation. Because blueprints could be copied almost infinitely. What was truly rare was Murphy Stone. Don't be stingy with the resources needed to buy the information." Understood. Currently, the ammunition for all the powerful firepower components on the train consumed iron ore. He needed a system that consumed copper ore. Otherwise, what was he going to do with those 90 trillion units of copper ore? Just leave them there to look pretty? After that, Chen Meng strode back to the control room, sat in front of the control panel, and looked at the component information displayed on the screen. The first component to upgrade was, of course, the armor. Even though it was always the biggest resource sink, the sense of security it provided after every upgrade was something no other component could match. After consuming 26 trillion units of iron ore, countless ores within the train turned into fragments and merged into the armor. The level number displayed on the screen began to skyrocket continuously. If one were to look down at the planetary train from above, they would see the outer armor constantly transforming, as if it were being forged in fire, until the armor level officially displayed 200. The upgrade was complete, and the train also received a brand new supermodel effect. Level 200 supermodel effect for the train car steel armor. When damaged in space, it can absorb core energy to rapidly regenerate. A very simple, very pure effect. It's just that. Chen Meng frowned slightly. Logically speaking, a level 200 supermodel effect was already god tier. Almost all components underwent a fundamental upgrade when they reached level 200, like the spatial gate or the refrigerator. But the armor's effect seemed a bit ordinary. It even felt a bit redundant, because the level 20 supermodel effect of the armor was already surface coated with an ion layer. The train car will rapidly self-repair when damaged. One was rapidly self-repair. The other was rapidly regenerate. Or in other words, maybe it was just repairing a bit faster. As for how fast, he had absolutely no concept of it. When in doubt, just run an experiment. But the moment the idea of shooting his own train to test it popped into his head, Chen Meng immediately squashed it. The reason was simple. Shooting your own train just sounded stupid. For now, he had no way to damage his own armor. He'd leave it for later. He'd just have to wait for an opportunity later to take a closer look and see exactly how fast this so-called rapid regeneration really was. One thing worth mentioning was that once a component's level reached 100, absolute level suppression no longer existed. It wasn't like a level 101 main cannon would be completely unable to deal damage to level 102 armor. It was just that the damage dealt would be lower than if it hit level 101 armor. Everything was calculated based on energy bands. When the attack energy was lower than the defense energy, it could still deal damage, just very low damage. This mechanic created the possibility of ants biting an elephant to death. As long as the numbers were large enough, level 101 main cannons could absolutely whittle down a train with level 121 armor bit by bit. Of course, the greater the level gap, the lower the damage. If the gap reached 20 levels, it was basically impossible to break through the defense. It should be emphasized that the level 101 main cannon mentioned here was assumed to be a 7-color quality firepower component. If it were swapped for a level 101 repeating crossbow, then let alone 10,000 of them, even 10 billion wouldn't be able to break the basic defense. The energy band of a repeating crossbow was just too low, so low that it was a bit pitiful. Phew, Chen Meng let out a long breath. The armor reaching level 200 gave him an intense sense of security. Even if star system number 27 erupted into another self-directed Zerg invasion, he could completely withstand an attack capable of destroying a planet without being affected in the slightest. From a certain perspective, the planetary train was now even tougher than a planet. Destroying an inhabited planet was sometimes easier than destroying the planetary train. He glanced at the adjacent screen. Little Green wasn't sleeping today. Instead, it was playing with young Master Li and the others in the rear carriage. It was sitting on the back of young Master Li's star-treading saber tiger, a star behemoth, puffing out its chest in an incredibly smug manner. This was the first star behemoth Little Green had defeated, and also its only kin on the train. Because of this, Little Green had really enjoyed seeking out the star-treading saber tiger to play with lately. As for the tiger, it had completely submitted, becoming Little Green's very first underling. Even though it was hard to tell what puffing out its chest looked like on a round green fur ball, Little Green was definitely exuding that vibe. Chen Meng watched this scene, shook his head with a smile, lit another cigarette, and leaned back in his chair. Even Little Green had underlings now. The last time he went to the Mecha Research and Manufacturing Center and found out that little AI had a whole bunch of smart chips and research chips as her underlings, he had found it hilarious. And now look at this. Even Little Green had joined the boss club. The people around him seemed to be gradually becoming bosses in their own right. Very good. A lot of times, one of the greatest achievements of being a boss was making sure the people around you lived better lives. Thinking about it that way made him feel happy. Little Green's level was always tied to the armor. When the armor reached level 200, it meant Little Green's level also increased to level 200. Little Green was an exponential star behemoth. It needed to reach level 180 to enter its mature stage. Once mature, its maximum combat form could reach 0.1 light-years in length. Swallowing the entire star system number 27 along with its stars would be a simple matter. It just couldn't do it right now. It was too conspicuous here. It sounded absurd, even a bit helpless, but in reality, Chenmang still checked the Casa Times every day. The information that appeared on it was all high-value news. Yet, the sudden disappearance of the Xuanwu planet wasn't mentioned at all. No one cared. No one asked. He found this incredibly unreasonable. Even if the Casa Civilization Federation had nearly 10,000 level 1 civilizations. When one of those level 1 civilizations suddenly vanished, there should at least be someone asking questions or investigating. But there was nothing. No one cared. Only a few information platforms within star system number 27 were discussing it, their words filled with unease and panic. In the next 2 days, he needed to find a quiet corner of the universe to let Little Green show off its complete form. A body 0.1 light-years long. Just thinking about it was hard to imagine. Perhaps this was what a true star behemoth was. Destroying a planet was just its most basic ability, not even worth mentioning. Now he believed that in this universe, there truly existed star behemoths that fed on stars. As for that star-treading saber tiger, what even was that? Forget destroying a planet. Just destroying a stadium would leave it out of breath. In the residential carriage, young Master Li and the others stood to the side, smiling as they watched Little Green and the star-treading saber tiger playing in the distance, chatting as they watched. Boss Chenmang had quite the haul this time. The planetary train is probably about to undergo a qualitative leap. Who knows, maybe Boss Chenmang's civilization is already qualified to be included in the reconstruction program. No need to fear the Casa civilization or the Zerg civilization anymore. The old man from the Jime Entertainment Company looked at the scene before him and sighed slightly. If only the young miss were still here. Things are looking much brighter now. Hey, young Master Li, is your star behemoth having a stomachache? Why is it lying flat on the ground today, not moving an inch? Its body is shaking so violently, and it's sweating so much it looks like it's about to dehydrate. Looks like it. Let me go check on it. The star-treading saber tiger was still being ridden by Little Green. Its eyes were filled with terror as it lay flat on the ground, trembling like a leaf. It could clearly feel that its boss's aura had suddenly skyrocketed just now. The surge was so intense that it even found it hard to breathe. It was hard for the others to notice, but as a star behemoth, it was extremely sensitive to this kind of aura. It really wanted to try and get up, because this was its boss. Its boss wouldn't kill it, but its body completely refused to obey its will. The boss is just too strong. A few minutes later, Little Green was rolling around on the ground, looking incredibly happy. As for the star-treading saber tiger, it had its tongue hanging out, running excitedly behind Little Green, darting all over the place like a little tail. That soul-deep trembling sensation had completely vanished. Just now, the boss had given it a beating. After getting beaten, for some reason, it felt much better. The fear had also dissipated. It was truly miraculous. It just felt incredibly excited that its boss had gotten stronger. And by a very logical extension, if its boss was stronger, it was like it was stronger too. The pavilion master of the Heavenly Secret Pavilion stood in the distance, looking at the scene before him, then glanced at young Master Li beside him. With a slightly weird expression, he said, "Young Master Li, your star behemoth seems to be more sensible than you are." "Screw off." Young Master Li pouted, replying unhappily. After confirming that the star-treading saber tiger was fine, he felt relieved. He had thought to himself, how could a star behemoth suddenly get sick? With that kind of physique, being so weak would be a total embarrassment. But deep down, he couldn't help but secretly rejoice. His star behemoth and Boss Chenmang's star behemoth were so close. So, in a way, it really was a case of the father rising in status because of the son. No matter how he thought about it, it made perfect sense. Over these past few days, he had also overcome the sorrow in his heart. What happened had happened. He could only accept it. What he needed to do next was pull himself together, perform well, and find his own place on the planetary train. If he ever got the chance in the future, he would rebuild his onion civilization. He reached up and touched the onion sprout on top of his head. There had to be other survivors of the onion civilization living on nearby planets. In a few days, he wanted to ask Boss Chen Meng if they could take those survivors with them, so that in the future, they would have a chance to multiply and thrive, allowing the onion civilization to proudly stand in the world once again. Continuing the upgrades. In the control room of the planetary train, Chen Meng's work hadn't stopped yet. After upgrading the armor to level 200, his focus immediately shifted to the remaining 7-color quality components. For example, the top-ranked 7-color firepower component, the Asgard Energy Main Cannon. This component had been upgraded to level 101 last time. This time, after consuming 5 trillion units of iron ore, it was directly upgraded to level 200, simultaneously gaining a brand new God-tier supermodel effect. Level 200 supermodel effect for the Asgard Energy Main Cannon. The energy beam attack will continuously increase in power as it travels. The further the distance, the higher the damage. Using 1 light year as the unit of growth, there is no limit to the damage increase. Chen Meng narrowed his eyes slightly. Looking at this effect, his brain immediately went into overdrive. Was this God-tier supermodel effect strong? It felt incredibly strong. No limit to the damage increase. Just hearing that sounded completely broken. Theoretically, if he fired a shot from the main cannon right now, and it didn't hit any large celestial bodies or random space junk along the way, letting the beam fly straight through the universe, then after crossing hundreds of millions of light years, the power of that single shot could absolutely obliterate both the Kasa civilization and the Zerg civilization. Every living being within a radius of hundreds of thousands of light years would face a catastrophe. Hundreds of millions of light years sounded absurd, but some superclusters actually had diameters reaching that scale. The beam reaching the speed of light in the universe was the limit, or perhaps even surpassing it. But placed in the context of the entire universe, it was still like a child's first step. You could spend your whole life and still never reach the edge of the universe to take a look. The universe was just that vast. So it wasn't strange at all that it birthed all sorts of bizarre civilizations. Forget the train civilization. Even if there was a civilization that grew stronger by eating shit, it wouldn't be unbelievable. It's just that his attack beam traveling 1 light year would take exactly 1 year of time. If he fired a shot at the Zerg civilization right now, it would still take tens of thousands of years to get there. With every light year that passed, the damage would multiply again. The effect was incredibly strong, but it required an extreme amount of time to reach its potential. And it didn't necessarily have to be a level 200 Asgard cannon. As long as it surpassed level 101, it could create an effect capable of destroying any enemy tens of thousands of years later. Destroying any enemy. So far, only this component could do that. Should he fire a test shot? Chen Meng felt a bit itchy to try. His eyes looked toward the south on the galactic map. In this vast region, to the left was the Zerg civilization, to the right was the Kasa civilization, and above were the ruins of the mechanical civilization. Only the bottom was empty. No planets, no stars, not even dust clouds. To the south was the cosmic void. It was an extremely unique existence in the universe, usually possessing a structure of unimaginably massive scale. There were almost no galaxies, no planets, and no visible matter. It was a vast expanse of emptiness, exactly like a cosmic desert, creating a stark contrast with the densely packed galactic regions and superclusters. At the same time, it was a crucial part of the universe's web-like structure. The diameter of a cosmic void often reached tens of millions, or even billions of light years. Once formed, its scale was never small. The matter density inside was about 10 to 20% lower than the universe's average. It was primarily composed of dark matter, accompanied by an extremely minuscule amount of gas. Its shape was usually spherical or elliptical. If you compared the entire universe to a block of Swiss cheese, the dense star regions like galaxy clusters would be the cheese, and the cosmic voids would be the holes. Every hole was massive, scattered everywhere. Different civilizations called this region by different names. In the Kasa civilization, it was called the Void. Absolute nothingness. There was nothing there. No train could cross this region. Not even him. Along the way, there wasn't even a single resource supply point. Even though his train's energy consumption while moving could be reduced by 99.9% twice over, making it practically zero, the principle relied on absorbing the core energy flowing through the universe. And core energy came from the leakage of planets. This region had absolutely no planets. Where would the leaking core energy come from? Forget about supermodel effects. Even with ultra-pure effects, entering this place would only lead to one outcome: stalling out halfway and dying on the spot. Furthermore, inside the cosmic void, there wasn't a single star. There was no luminous matter whatsoever. If hell truly existed in this world, it was definitely located in the middle of a cosmic void. This was an absolute forbidden zone in the universe. No one set foot there, and no one could explore it. At the same time, it was also the emptiest region in the entire universe. In the vast majority of cases, cosmic voids were completely useless. Their only purpose was to help people better understand the diversity of the universe. Chen Meng had learned about this region when he left the Blue Water Planet and entered the interior of the Casa Civilization Federation. But he had never given it much thought, simply because it had no practical use. But Chen Meng narrowed his eyes slightly. For an attack beam to travel tens of thousands of light years unobstructed through galaxy clusters or dense galactic regions was truly very difficult. Like those beams he fired right after leaving the Blue Water Planet, they had probably only traveled about 2 light years by now. Who knows, they might have already hit some dead star and dissipated into the universe. But if it was in a cosmic void, it would be completely different. Zero obstructions, green lights all the way, flying smoothly for tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions of light years, would just be a normal occurrence. When the beam he fired crossed the southern cosmic void over hundreds of millions of years and reached the other side, the power it unleashed would be enough to shake the entire universe. Thinking of this, his expression turned a bit grim, because he really wanted to fire a shot over there just for the hell of it. Even though he might never live to see the result, he still wanted to shoot. And if he could think of this, then someone else definitely could too. Humans were born with an innate desire for destruction. It was human nature. When they were kids, they liked playing with lighters and burning things, or pouring water into ant nests. Standing on the edge of a rooftop, they'd get the urge to jump. Seeing exquisite porcelain, they'd want to smash it. Humans were born loving destruction, destroying themselves, destroying beauty, destroying everything they could see. The trained civilization definitely didn't just exist in this one region. It was highly likely that on the other side of the cosmic void, another trained civilization existed. Someone else might have also upgraded their Asgard main cannon to level 200. They might have even fired a shot into the cosmic void millions, or even hundreds of millions of years ago, and it would arrive here someday in the future. No one could say for sure. With the Asgard main cannon and the cosmic void being such a perfect match, who could resist firing a shot? It would be weird if they didn't. Chen Meng thought about it for a long time. He felt that if there really was a civilization on the other side of the cosmic void, they had definitely already fired a shot over. It would just take a very long time to get here. No way. He had to fire a shot too. In the universe, assuming an unknown civilization was an enemy always yielded far greater benefits than assuming they were a friend. Conversely, assuming they were a friend was a dangerous act. Chen Meng didn't like broadcasting a hello world to the entire universe. He preferred doing more practical things. He was past the age of wanting to make friends. No sooner said than done. Chen Meng didn't hesitate at all. He immediately pushed the train's speed to its absolute limit. After searching through the official strategic wormholes of star system number 27 for a while, he finally found one that led straight south. Currently, he held the status of a free army soldier, giving him the right to use strategic wormholes for free. Of course, this wormhole was strictly one way. But that didn't matter. 2 hours later, the planetary train arrived at the extreme south. At this moment, there were still many trains emerging from the wormhole behind him one after another, using this place as a transit station, launching flanking attacks on the Zerg civilization, splitting into various prongs of assault. They were all free army forces, not subject to any management. As long as they caused trouble in Zerg territory, they could do whatever they wanted. But in exchange, there was zero logistical support. Everything had to be self-sufficient. It was the equivalent of bringing your own armor to the battlefield. Meanwhile, the planetary train gradually broke away from the formation, plunging alone into the vast universe, heading in that direction. Speed pushed to the max. After about 40 hours, it finally approached the edge of the cosmic void. In the control room, Chen Meng looked ahead, a flash of unconcealable shock appearing in his eyes. Even though he already knew the data regarding cosmic voids and had seen countless astronomical photos, actually standing before it gave a completely different feeling. Ahead, there was no light whatsoever, no luminous objects, just absolute blackness, pure nothingness. Staring at it for too long even induced a hallucinatory sense of vertigo, like falling into a bottomless abyss. It was an incredibly rare sensation, enough to overturn one's conventional understanding of the universe. Ahead was endless darkness. Behind was a dense gathering of countless galaxies, even forming galactic walls. The level of darkness here was equivalent to 100 times the darkest night on a planet. It looked as if the entire universe had been cleaved in half by a single sword strike. If this region didn't belong to the train civilization, but to a cultivation civilization, then this site would definitely spawn countless legends about two cosmic-level powerhouses battling it out, fighting so fiercely they sliced the universe in two. The feeling of absolute isolation even made one hallucinate that the universe was evaporating or slowly dying out. Good thing I'm not a philosopher, Chen Meng muttered. He only felt shocked. He had absolutely no intention of pondering the meaning of human existence. That's because you aren't married yet, little AI's lazy voice echoed through the train. In the train civilization, there's a saying, marry a good wife, and you'll live happily. Marry a bad wife, and you'll become a philosopher. Me? Chen Meng shook his head and said softly, she'd need several extra lives to turn me into a philosopher. He didn't hesitate any longer and reached out to press the button on the control panel. Immediately after, the A cannon on the roof of the train began charging frantically, the patterns on its barrel lighting up one by one. Just a dozen seconds later, accompanied by a violent tremor throughout the train, a massive pillar of light shot straight into the depths of the cosmic void at terrifying speed. Right after that, the cannon charged up 2 more times. 3 blessings were sent out from the planet train, each aimed in a different direction. Visible to the naked eye, the 3 beams of light quickly plunged deep into the cosmic void, becoming the only light sources in this area before gradually shrinking away. Under normal circumstances, they only carried a level 101 energy band. But if they flew hundreds of millions of light years across the cosmic void, that energy band would amplify to a level no civilization could withstand. No exceptions. And no way to stop it. These 3 shots had cost him 240 billion units of iron ore. This was a cross-spatial attack, using the axis of time as its vector. In the control room, Chen Meng quietly watched the 3 pillars of light fade away. He might not be the first to open Pandora's box, but he had definitely opened it. He didn't believe that on the other side of the cosmic void, there existed a civilization where every single individual could restrain their destructive urges. Therefore, he chose to strike back. He wouldn't live to see the moment those 3 pillars of light detonated hundreds of millions of years from now. He couldn't possibly live that long. But when that day truly came, he hoped his descendants would understand that today's decision wasn't a mistake. Merit or sin, let future generations judge. Right after, Chen Meng called Xiao Lu to the control room, gently rubbed its head, and smiled. Go on, show me your combat form. Let's see if all the resources I've poured into you all this time were actually worth it. Xiao Lu seemed to understand. It nodded, flew out of the train, and darted straight into the depths of space. Meanwhile, the planet train immediately turned around, flying in the opposite direction at top speed. Very quickly, Chen Meng realized something was wrong. The planet train's current speed had reached 163,000 kilometers per hour, over 160,000 kilometers per hour. But Xiao Lu's speed seemed vastly faster, exaggerated to an unbelievable degree. About 9 days later. That's right, 9 days. Initially, after just 2 days, he started regretting it, thinking maybe he could just watch it next time. But then he figured he'd already wasted 2 days. Turning back now would mean it was all for nothing. even though logic dictated that sunk costs shouldn't affect decision-making. He consoled himself that this wasn't urgent, nor a life-or-death decision, so he might as well see it through. After 9 days, he finally received a signal from Xiao Lu, indicating it was ready to begin. A void behemoth raised in the behemoth carriage wasn't just close to the captain. It could also communicate telepathically from afar. This was originally a method of communication that only existed between a void behemoth and its parents. Right after that, boom. There was no actual sound, but the noise seemed to explode directly inside his head. In the distant reaches of space, an unimaginably colossal object suddenly appeared, completely dominating his field of vision. That was Xiao Lu. Although the width of Xiao Lu's combat form reached 0.1 light-years, its length was much narrower. Right now, Xiao Lu was facing him, so running for 9 days was just enough distance. If it had turned sideways, 9 days wouldn't have been nearly enough. He probably would have had to run for a few more years just to see its general outline. Just thinking about it was exhausting. Chen Meng stared at the scene before him, his eyes filled with absolute shock. Even though he had been running for 9 days, and Xiao Lu had been moving forward for 9 days, the moment Xiao Lu activated its combat form, its entire body still instantly erupted right in front of him. It was fundamentally impossible to observe the whole picture with the naked eye. It took up almost half the universe in his line of sight, like an endless wall, or more accurately, a colossal curve. Because the distance was so vast, light from different parts of its body took varying amounts of time to reach him, making the image in his eyes distorted and incomprehensible. It felt very much like those Cthulhu-esque entities, incomprehensible to look at, and the longer you stared, the more wrong it felt. The diameter of the sun in his old world was about 1.39 million kilometers. It was already considered a massively colossal existence in that world's galaxy. But Xiao Lu's width was 680,000 times the diameter of the sun. That number alone said it all. Holy shit. Chen Meng took a deep breath. The cigarette burned down to his fingers, snapping him back to reality. He hastily blew on his hand to cool it down before blurting out, "Damn it, isn't this a bit too ridiculous?" He had known this data for a long time, but theoretical numbers and seeing it with his own eyes were two entirely different concepts. "It really is ridiculous," Xiao AI's sluggish voice echoed through the train. "It's not even scientifically sound. Captain, do you even know what 0.1 light-years means? This isn't just an issue of massive size. According to biological theory, a creature of this size fundamentally cannot exist, let alone anything else. Just the transmission of its neural signals far exceeds the speed of light. It takes light over a month to travel 0.1 light-years. Yet this little guy's neural signals transmit across its entire body almost instantaneously. This isn't a void behemoth anymore. Let's just call it the master of the universe and be done with it." Chen Meng fell silent, his gaze somewhat dazed. Perhaps human senses were simply inadequate to comprehend this kind of existence. Right now, the edges of Xiao Lu's body and his vision were completely blurred and distorted. Only the central area was relatively clear, but as time passed, that clear zone was gradually expanding. "I've also discovered a lot of other data," Xiao AI continued explaining. "The mass of Xiao Lu's combat form is not low at all. Just by standing here doing nothing, the tidal forces it generates are enough to tear apart the defenses of low-level trains within a radius of thousands of kilometers. Of course, the planet train won't be affected. Luckily, its mass hasn't reached an overly exaggerated level yet. If it were any larger, this area would experience a time dilation effect. It's possible that 1 hour for us here would equal several months passing on the outside. No matter how vast the universe is, a localized area can't handle having such a massive lump thrown into it like this. It's like a tumor in the human body. If it grows slowly, the body can tolerate it. But if a massive tumor suddenly appears, something is definitely going to break." After a long while, Chen Meng finally sighed. He leaned back in his chair, lit another cigarette, and quietly watched the scene unfold. A colossal mass of flesh that defied conventional physics occupied his entire field of vision. Every movement on its surface far exceeded scientific comprehension. Conventional science was completely useless here. He felt that naming this thing Xiao Lu was really inappropriate. It didn't fit at all. Maybe calling it a great old one, would be more fitting. If this entity were to appear within the observable range of any pre-spaceflight civilization, it could instantly regress that civilization from a technological era straight into a religious one, with the entire population collectively worshipping Cthulhu. Void behemoths truly are the darlings of the universe. Before this, he never had a clear, intuitive grasp of what an S-rank potential void behemoth meant. He only knew that the strongest void behemoth ever recorded by the mechanical civilization was only B rank. By comparison, S rank had to be very strong. But exactly how strong was completely vague to him. Now he understood. Just one word: invincible. Xiao AI, if I fire a level 200 A cannon energy blast at Xiao Lu right now, would it have almost no effect? Not almost, Xiao AI replied calmly. It would have absolutely no effect. Xiao Lu's defense is inherited from the armor, which is also level 200 defense. It can withstand the vast majority of destructive forces, even if it actually gets pierced. With a body that size, a tiny puncture wound makes virtually no difference. Even if there were multiple puncture wounds, Xiao Lu still inherits the level 200 super effect of the armor, granting it hyper-regeneration in space. It would fully heal in the blink of an eye. As of now, there are only two ways to kill Xiao Lu. One is to use an attack with an energy band far exceeding level 200 to obliterate it. For example, your A-cannon, Captain. If the beam could travel for several 100,000 years, one shot would definitely take Xiao Lu down without a problem. But it's very hard to hit. Two is to throw it into a cosmic void, preventing it from regenerating, and then crush it to death with a massive saturation attack. Aside from these two scenarios, Xiao Lu is basically invincible. No one can kill it. Hard to hit. Chen Meng frowned slightly. The A-cannon is a light-speed attack. It's already at the speed of light. How is it hard to hit? Sigh. Xiao AI sighed helplessly. Captain, your Xiao Lu has reached a perverted level of power. Don't you realize that? Are you still treating it like the cute little pet it usually is? Damn it. It went from tiny to 0.1 light years across in a split second. When an attack is about to hit, it can just shrink instantly. Who could possibly hit that? Logically speaking, Xiao Lu suddenly expanding to this size is already equivalent to a controlled Big Bang. Its expansion speed is faster than the speed of light. Even light itself would have to call it daddy. If we followed conventional physics, this area should have been destroyed by now. There should be a series of bizarre events like space-time paradoxes, even tearing the local space-time fabric to form a naked singularity, completely violating the laws of conservation of mass and energy. To maintain such a colossal body, the energy required is absolutely absurd. Even now, I don't understand where Xiao Lu gets its energy from. Could it be from those piles of iron ore? But logically, that amount of energy might support its expansion for a brief moment, but it's absolutely not enough to maintain this form. Wait, Captain. I suddenly understand why the scene before us is so calm. As time passes, what we observe becomes clearer, but what we're looking at isn't Xiao Lu's front. It's its butt. Do you want to ask it what its head is doing right now? I'm a little worried that it's going to eat this entire area clean and turn it into a brand new cosmic void. Thank goodness there are no inhabited planets around here. Otherwise, who knows how many people would have died this time. Xiao AI's emotions were a bit agitated. Clearly, Xiao Lu's existence had created a violent conflict with all of her foundational data. Chen Meng thought for a long time, then smiled and said, to sum it up in one sentence, Xiao Lu is very strong, right? Not just strong, Xiao AI replied helplessly. It is a true great old one. Train ultimate skill, instant armament. Chen Meng sat in the control room of the planet train, looking at Xiao Lu, whose edges were still distorted in front of him, his eyes full of amusement. Xiao Lu was only a fraction of the planet train's power. And if Xiao Lu's current power was already this terrifying, then the true power of the entire planet train went without saying. Invincible. If it weren't for the fact that he still didn't have full intel on the Casa civilization and the Zerg civilization, he would have charged straight into the Zerg civilization's territory right now, just to see if they had any way to deal with Xiao Lu. He had a feeling that the infinite reproduction the Zerg civilization was so proud of would probably just amount to an all-you-can-eat buffet in front of Xiao Lu. He used to think this was an insanely broken bug, strong to the point of invincibility. But looking at it now, it seemed it still wasn't enough. It was all side effects. It seemed the very purpose of this race's existence was to provide buffet meals for void behemoths. However, Xiao AI, you never used to swear before. You've changed. Xiao AI choked on her words, saying nothing. It was simply unacceptable. Xiao Lu was originally just a mascot on the train. How did it suddenly transform into an ancient ruler? This power spike was too terrifying, and most importantly, it was completely illogical. Did the creator, when setting the rules, intentionally create an existence that breaks them? This was absolutely heaven's favored child. Chun Meng reeled in his thoughts and continued taking inventory of this haul. The harvest was too massive. It would still take some time to fully digest it all. This upgrade included the armor and the A cannon, consuming a total of 31 trillion units of iron ore. Meanwhile, the iron ore harvested alone amounted to 90 trillion units, leaving 59 trillion units still unused. The next plan was very clear. First, upgrade all the major prismatic components, then begin mass production. Next was the prismatic component, wormhole radar. This component was currently at level 10, used to detect nearby wormholes with a scanning range of 10 light years. After consuming 5.18 trillion units of iron ore, it skyrocketed straight to level 200. Level 20 wormhole radar super effect, none. Level 50 wormhole radar super effect, none. Level 100 wormhole radar super effect, none. Level 200 wormhole radar super effect, none. Well, damn it. But after reaching level 200, the scanning range directly surged to 100,000 light years, which could be considered a qualitative upgrade. Before level 200, each level up only increased the scanning range by 1 light year. But now, it shot straight to the heavens. Level 200 was the beginning of a qualitative transformation. But the damn thing was, the super effects of this prismatic component from level 20 onwards were all none, which meant the god-tier level 200 super effect Qin Meng had been hoping for was still none. He silently made a mental note of this component. Once Qi Kishio made some progress on his end, he would come back and modify its super effects. Regardless, the most important aspect of this component was its scanning range, and 100,000 light years was more than enough. Enough to cover the entirety of the Kasa civilization and the Zerg civilization. Next were the remaining prismatic components, all of which he had obtained when leaving the Shuelon planet. That day, in the 7-color zone of the Shuelon planet, he had acquired a total of 6 prismatic component blueprints, including Wormhole Generator. He had previously upgraded this component to level 100. Doppler Radar SP7, a higher-end version of the scanning radar. It was much stronger, but also consumed a terrifying amount of resources. He hadn't been willing to craft it before. Doppler Energy Shield SP7, the strongest defensive component in the group, higher tier than the armor. Not only did it have equivalent defense, but it also came with many other special effects. But the problem was, the train armor was only a green tier component, while this was a prismatic component. Defensive components were already expensive. Prismatic defense was absurdly expensive. Even if he didn't spend a single dime and poured in all the resources he had accumulated over the years, it still wouldn't be enough to upgrade this component to level 200. It was so expensive that just looking at the price gave him a headache. For now, he wouldn't replace this component. He would only consider switching to prismatic defense when his resources were truly abundant. But for now, he could still give it a basic upgrade. Take a gamble. Who knows? Maybe the super effects would all have resource consumption. And if not, he could still temporarily boost the train's defense using the absolute defense ultimate skill. A Cannon Energy Main Cannon, a prismatic firepower component, already upgraded to level 200. He had just casually fired a few shots with it. It was just a pity he wouldn't get the chance to see the explosion. Then again, maybe no one would ever see it in their lifetime. Doppler Radar Jammer SP7, a higher-end version of the radar jammer. Doppler Tail Thruster SP7, a higher-end version of the Nitro Tail Thruster. He had possessed these prismatic components for a long time, but due to a lack of resources, he could only keep them in storage. But today was different. Upgrade them all. Upgrade everything. Except for the Doppler Energy Shield SP7, The rest were standard prismatic components. The cost to upgrade them to level 200 was 5 trillion units of iron ore each. After consuming 20 trillion units of iron ore, the Doppler Radar SP7, Wormhole Generator, Doppler Radar Jammer SP7, and Doppler Tail Thruster SP7 were all upgraded to level 200. Phew! Chen Meng looked at the control panel and the super effects of the Doppler Radar SP7, letting out a soft breath. He then reached out and gently stroked the old scanning radar screen on the console. His voice was full of emotion. "Old friend, it's time to retire. Your big brother is here." Whether it was the super effects or the panel stats, the Doppler SP7 completely crushed the scanning radar in every aspect. They weren't even on the same tier. Comparing them was pointless. High-end components, aside from their massive resource consumption, had almost no other drawbacks. For the scanning radar, from level 100 onwards, the super effects were all none. It didn't even have a god-tier effect. Meanwhile, the Doppler radar had it all. The level 200 scanning radar only had a scanning range of 0.1 light-years, which he had felt was enough at the time. But the level 200 Doppler radar's scanning range directly reached 100,000 light-years. Upgrading the scanning radar to level 200 cost 800 million iron ore. Upgrading the Doppler radar to level 200 cost 5 trillion iron ore. You get what you pay for. It was well worth it. Level 5 Doppler Radar SP7 Super Effect. All firepower weapons can lock onto targets within radar range via the train's AI assist. Level 10, Level 20, Level 50. Each level has energy consumption. Level 100. Gathers more information, near instantaneous transmission. Level 200. Breaks stealth. Displays all major energy fluctuations within a 100,000 light-year radius, and captures live visual feeds. It sounded pretty standard. But in reality, it was absurdly overpowered. Before, the scanning radar only let him see a few signal blips. But now, the Doppler radar directly showed him specific images. For example, right now, he was watching the Zerg civilization and the Kasa civilization officially engage in battle. Not just images, but video. Real time. What he was seeing was exactly what was happening simultaneously tens of thousands of light years away, with almost zero latency. This transmission speed was entirely worthy of the word super. And the most terrifying part was the level 200 god-tier super effect, scanning all energy fluctuations within a 100,000 light-year radius. Not just living creatures, but inanimate objects too. Nothing could hide. The fight doesn't look too lively. Chen Meng stared at the screen, zooming in and out, seemingly enjoying the show. On the Zerg civilization's side, although fireworks filled the sky, their strongest attack energy level was only equivalent to a standard level 150 prismatic firepower component. Compared to the mechanical civilization ruins, they weren't even on the same level. With just a glance, he could see millions of light beams piercing through the void in that distant space. Those were the lingering traces of a war that had raged hundreds of years ago, still not completely dissipated to this day. The peak energy levels among them had reached the equivalent of a level 270 prismatic firepower component. The Kasa civilization and the mechanical civilization were both Tier 3 civilizations. Theoretically, the gap shouldn't be this massive. Perhaps the Kasa civilization still hadn't gone all out, or maybe the mechanical civilization of the past had also possessed a level 200A cannon. Those beams of light, after drifting through the long river of time, had continuously accumulated power, which was why they had become so terrifying. But right at this moment, as Chen Meng continuously zoomed out on the screen, his expression instantly darkened. It could even be described as extremely ugly. In the southernmost area of the screen, the cosmic void, there were currently 7 beams of light hurtling straight toward their sector. Among them, the strongest beam carried an energy level equivalent to a prismatic firepower component. At level 4,987. That's right, level 4,987. He had completely lost any concept of what this level even meant. He only knew that a level 100A cannon was enough to destroy a planet. Level 4,987. Nearly level 5,000. In this sector, whether it was the Kasa civilization or the Zerg civilization, There was only one outcome waiting for them: death. That beam was also the closest one to them, about 80,000 light-years away. In other words, 80,000 years from now, this attack would completely obliterate this entire sector of space, not leaving a single blade of grass behind. I knew it. Motherfucker, I knew it. Chen Meng gritted his teeth, his voice laced with fury. He had guessed early on that if a civilization existed on the other side of the cosmic void, and if it was a trained civilization, possessing a level 200A cannon, they definitely wouldn't be able to resist firing a shot over here. And now, sure enough, it was coming. He didn't know how large the diameter of the cosmic void was. It could be tens of millions of light years, or even hundreds of millions of light years. But based on common sense, the minimum diameter of a cosmic void was already tens of millions of light years. In other words, tens of millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of years ago, long before he was even born. Even before intelligent life had necessarily appeared in this sector, some trigger-happy bastard had fired an 8-cannon shot in this direction. A total of 7 beams. Clearly, they weren't all fired by the same person. The distance between them was a few hundred light years, meaning every few hundred years, some bored idiot fired a shot. So many years had passed. His current radar scanning range was only 100,000 light years, so he could only see the 7 beams within this range. God only knows how many greetings had been tossed into the entire cosmic void. The cosmic void looked desolate on the surface, but in reality, the inside might have already turned into a cream puff full of holes. What truly angered Chen Meng wasn't that someone was attacking them. This was completely normal. The universe was just like that. He totally understood. After all, he had just tossed a few shots over there himself. What pissed him off the most was that he couldn't get revenge. By the time he saw this attack, the one who fired it had probably been dead for tens of millions of years, let alone their descendants. It was highly likely that the enemy's entire civilization had already gone extinct. This kind of cross-space-time attack gave people a sense of despairing helplessness. He wasn't too worried about his own safety. The closest beam was still 80,000 light-years away. It wouldn't arrive for another 80,000 years. By then, he would either be long dead. Human lifespans couldn't stretch that far, or, if he wasn't dead, he would have left this sector a long time ago. But still, it was infuriating. So damn infuriating. He had to strike back. He had to do something, otherwise, he wouldn't be able to swallow this anger. Without hesitation, Chen Meng adjusted the nose of the train slightly, aimed straight at the cosmic void, and fired 3 more shots. An exchange of gifts. After that, he gradually calmed down and continued staring at the real-time feed of that terrifying beam of light, the one with an energy level reaching level 4,987. The control room screen lit up. In the void of darkness, a colossal beam of light carrying an unimaginable pressure was silently hurtling forward. Who knew how long it had been flying, or how much longer it had to fly? It was like an eternal existence that never knew fatigue. In his line of sight, this beam of light appeared almost stationary. There were no reference points around it, making it impossible to determine its true size. He could only sense that it was massive. He didn't know if his empathy was just acting up, but Chen Meng suddenly felt that this beam of light was very lonely. Advancing alone through the desolate cosmic void for tens of millions of years, while the civilization that birthed it might have already perished through countless cycles of replacement. Poor kid. Chen Meng suddenly sighed, feeling inexplicably emotional. It was worth noting that the Doppler radar scanning range was a 100,000 light-year radius, not diameter. Theoretically, his observation range was much larger. The cosmic void before him was simply too vast. He couldn't see its edges, so it was unclear if any other civilizations had bypassed the cosmic void and launched attacks toward this sector. Logically, the chances of that were very low. After all, this wasn't a high-tier resource zone. It was unlikely to attract the special attention of distant civilizations. But the problem lay right here. A cosmic void existed in this place. So there would definitely be a few civilizations that, out of sheer curiosity, would want to see what exactly lay behind the cosmic void. This was an inherent trait of humanity. It was like telling someone to climb a mountain without offering any reward. They might not even bother moving. But the moment a question popped into their head like, what's behind that mountain? then no matter how arduous it was, they would push through just to get a look. Humanity spent their entire lives obsessed with this one thing. What exactly is behind that giant mountain? Honestly, who cares what's behind it? Whether you can even climb it is the real question. However, the Kasa civilization and the Zerg civilization probably weren't that strong either. Qin looked at the data on the Doppler screen, deep in thought. He didn't have a deep understanding of these two civilizations, but so far, he had never seen any intel suggesting that countless attacks from the cosmic void would flood in the future. So did they completely lack high-level radars to detect it? Or did they simply think 80,000 years was too far off to worry about for now? Upgrading the Doppler radar to level 200 actually didn't cost that many resources. It only took exactly 5 trillion units of iron ore. For the Kasa civilization, this number was so small it was basically pocket change dropped under the table. The only catch was that the merphite consumption was a bit on the high side. A gold-tier component upgraded to level 200 typically required 14,580 merphites. But a prismatic component upgraded to level 200 usually required a staggering 8 million merphites. Not much at all, just 8 million pieces. Sounded pretty manageable if you ignored the wallet-aching sensation every time you watched your resource vault empty out. The Kasa civilization could definitely afford it. After all, radar intel played an extremely crucial role in a civilization war. There was no way they wouldn't build one. If the Kasa civilization really had a radar like that, they definitely wouldn't be able to detect him, because he already had a radar jammer. Qin tilted his head and looked at Xiao Lu floating in space, not far away. He wondered if the other side had detected Xiao Lu. The energy fluctuation Xiao Lu caused when it expanded just now was no small matter. Whatever. If they detected it, they detected it. He didn't need to hide anymore anyway. Once he developed a bit more, why bother hiding? Kasa, Zerg, whatever, he'd just wipe them all out and be done with it. These two civilizations were truly a waste of resources. One side used resources to breed a bunch of useless monsters. The other side had resources but didn't know how to use them, feeding a bunch of parasites and failing to build even a single top-tier train. If those resources had fallen into his hands, he would have been invincible long ago. He wouldn't need to sit here sighing. Upgrading these prismatic components to level 200 consumed a total of 20 trillion units of iron ore, leaving the train with 34 trillion units of iron ore. Additionally, the wormhole generator component at level 100 could create a wormhole up to 100 light-years away. But after reaching level 200, the distance instantly leaped to 100,000 light-years. A true qualitative change. Right now, he could directly create a wormhole spanning 100,000 light-years, and he had also gained a new super effect. Level 200 Wormhole Generator Super Effect. When detecting the coordinates of a wormhole created by another civilization, you can take a shortcut. Create a wormhole that connects directly into that wormhole, drastically reducing consumption. However, the creator of the original wormhole will be alerted. Qin glanced at the stats. To create a wormhole spanning 100,000 light-years, required a staggering 30 trillion units of iron ore. That was enough for him to upgrade the armor to level 200. This thing, even with two super effects having the consumption, he definitely couldn't afford to create one himself. Thinking about it, this level 200 super effect was still pretty good. He could hitch a ride, sneaking straight into a wormhole made by someone else, which would cost significantly less. The only downside was that it would highly likely result in a fight. But the cost of a fight was definitely still much cheaper than opening a wormhole himself. So, it was still a profit. The Doppler radar jammer SP7 had also been upgraded to level 200. This way, even if the Kasa civilization had a level 200 Doppler radar, they still wouldn't be able to detect him. He was completely hidden. Even the energy fluctuations he caused couldn't be detected. Logically speaking, Xiao Lu was originally a part of the train, acting as a carriage. He wondered if it would also benefit from this effect. Doppler Radar Jammer SP7 Super Effects, level 5, 10, 20, and 50 all have energy consumption. At level 100, it can absorb light, allowing the train to achieve optical camouflage, invisible even when standing right in front of someone. As for level 200, when the train is scanned by radar or other means, it will emit a beep-beep warning. This optical camouflage effect is incredibly useful, literally turning invisible right in front of others. Normally, the upper limit for prismatic components was only level 100, so most trains could reach this level as long as they had enough resources. But after level 100, upgrading further required a massive amount of merphite, and that wasn't something you could just get because you wanted it. In other words, there were probably quite a few trains capable of optical camouflage, but only Chun Meng's planet train had the ability to break others' stealth. Just thinking about it was enough to see. It was pretty much bullying. He was quite satisfied with the super effects of these two components. After all, previously, the super effects of the radar jammer were just a cold, hard none slapped right in his face. At least this prismatic component offered some mental comfort. The only thing that annoyed him a bit was that the Doppler radar didn't have a super effect to directly scan the component levels of other trains. In other words, he couldn't just stand from afar and peep at people's stats. To know the component levels of an enemy train, he still had to rely on the scanning radar. He could only see it within a 0.1 light-year range, an effect that the scanning radar actually possessed. He'd still have to swap it back later. Although the super effects of the prismatic components were generally very good, he still felt they didn't completely hit the mark for him. It was the only minor flaw, hard to be 100% satisfied. Xiao AI, I'm here. How's the progress on Qi Kishio's end? He still needs more time. This isn't simple. It's estimated that the first component blueprint can be completed within 3 months. Try to speed it up a bit. If he needs anything, just say the word. The train will provide unlimited support. Understood. Besides that, there was one last prismatic component, the Doppler tail thruster SP7, a component dedicated to acceleration. He had also upgraded this to level 200. This was a purely stat-based component. No flashy gimmicks, no bells and whistles. He wasn't sure if the mechanical civilization back then had accidentally allocated the wrong stat points, or if the universe's blessing had just casually tossed it out like this. The last time he saw a purely stat-based component like this was the drill. The super effects of the Doppler tail thruster SP7 from level 5 to level 100 all had only one function, increasing speed. At level 200, it directly transformed into an explosive speed boost. Incredibly pure. So pure it was almost scary. The resulting effect was indeed terrifying. The planet train's original top speed was 163,000 kilometers per hour, which was already very high. After upgrading this component to level 200, that number directly skyrocketed to 3.37 million kilometers per hour, an increase of nearly 20 times. All of this was based solely on the consumption of 5 trillion units of iron ore. This was the very concept of burning money for speed materialized down to the exact numbers. As expected, Chun Meng sighed with deep emotion, lit a cigarette, and comfortably leaned back in his chair. Prismatic components. Aside from being expensive, there's really nothing else to complain about. Very good. I like it. 3.37 million kilometers per hour. This speed was enough. Just looking at the numbers made it a bit hard to visualize, but this was already at the speed level of an interstellar civilization. If traveling at this speed, moving forward 1 light year would only take about 300 years. It still sounded long, but at least he could now rely on himself to reach an area 1 light year away, rather than having to depend entirely on wormholes. Yeah, not bad at all. Chun Meng looked at the train screen. The live feed of the Doppler tail thruster SP7 installed on the planet train was clearly displayed. He gently pushed the control stick. The exhaust port at the rear of the planet train instantly spewed out a blazing red, liquid-like stream into space. That's right, liquid-like again. Blindingly red, shooting straight out into space, like the ion plasma ejected during a supernova explosion. As the tail thruster operated, the space around the stream began to distort. Moreover, it didn't erupt continuously, but in rhythmic pulses. Every second, the burst of energy formed a circular shockwave visible to the naked eye, propelling the planet train's speed to skyrocket. When pushed to full power, the entire planet train looked like a mechanical dragon trailing world-ending fury. Tearing straight through the galaxy, its momentum was so fierce it practically screamed, "Get out of my way!" But it's pretty badass. Chun Meng raised an eyebrow, glancing at the screen. Among all the components upgraded to level 200, this was the only one he dared to use freely. After all, the super effect reduced continuous movement consumption by 99.9% twice, making it practically zero. As for the A-Cannon Energy main cannon, forget it. Firing a level 200 shot was so expensive it gave him a heart attack. Firing a few level 101 shots for fun was enough. Level 200 was still too much of a luxury. Even with money, he shouldn't burn it like that. It made more sense to save it and use enemies as test subjects later. In addition, even the Doppler Energy Shield SP7 component had been upgraded to level 50, consuming 5 trillion units of iron ore. This thing was truly a massive resource sink. He originally hadn't wanted to upgrade it. He just wanted to gamble and see if it had a half-consumption super effect, hoping it would be a bit cheaper than the armor. But clearly, he had lost the bet. It didn't. The same amount of resources that was enough to upgrade other prismatic components to level 200 was only enough to get this shield to level 50. It should be known that before level 100, the consumption was still relatively tame. After level 100, it truly became a bottomless pit. The super effects of the Doppler Energy Shield SP7 included: Level 5 allows customization of the shield's color. Level 10 allows slow, automatic repair of damage. Level 20 reveals the component intel of an attacking enemy train. And level 50 can withstand almost all harsh environments in the universe. Although he deeply resented the upgrade cost of this component, he couldn't help but admit its early-level super effects were much stronger than those of the armor. Once he had money in the future, once he owned a literal mine, he definitely had to upgrade this component to level 200. No, level 500. If resources weren't an issue, then of course he would upgrade both the armor and the energy shield to level 500. That way, he'd have 2 layers of defense. When the enemy finally managed to break through the energy shield with great difficulty, only to discover there was still the armor underneath. Double defense. Just thinking about it made him feel bad for the enemy. Right now, when he activated the train's absolute defense ultimate skill, the maximum defensive energy level could reach level 250. Even though it only lasted for 10 seconds, those 10 seconds were enough for him to do a lot of things, at the very least, enough to turn the tide of battle. After that, he slowly pushed the control stick again. The train erupted with terrifying speed, hurtling straight toward Xiao Lu's position. At the same time, Xiao Lu instantly shrank and darted back toward him. The two sides were preparing to rendezvous and head back. However, when that colossal entity that had almost entirely occupied his vision suddenly vanished, the corner of Chun Meng's mouth twitched. He remembered very clearly that although this wasn't a populated sector, there were quite a few stars around. At the very least, there should have been a few scattered about. Yet now, the surroundings were completely empty. There was nothing left. Where did all those planets go? He even started to wonder if he had accidentally thrown Xiao Lu into a cosmic void. Why was the scenery so desolate? Looks like it's full. Xiao AI's sluggish voice echoed in the control room. This is probably the first time Xiao Lu has actively eaten since maturing. It looks exactly like a gluttonous little cat. After the train's speed skyrocketed, it took less than a day for him to reunite with Xiao Lu. Originally, Xiao Lu's speed was much faster than the planet train's, but after this major upgrade, the planet train had surpassed it. After welcoming Xiao Lu back onto the train, Chen Meng held it in his arms with a bizarre expression, looking it up and down before asking, "Just how many planets did you eat?" Xiao Lu opened its eyes and blinked, its gaze so innocent that one couldn't bear to scold it. It couldn't speak, only transmitting a very simple thought through its consciousness: "I'm full." Its intelligence was roughly equivalent to a human child's. It seemed God was quite fair, creating a terrifying species capable of dominating the universe like the void behemoth, but giving it an extremely long maturation period, accompanied by a not-so-developed brain. If the mechanical civilization hadn't invented the behemoth carriage, waiting for Xiao Lu to mature would have taken a very long time. Especially considering its origins, crashing onto the Shuelon planet in a state of starvation, it probably wouldn't have survived to this day. Fortunately, void behemoths didn't have a concept of race. Otherwise, if all void behemoths like Xiao Lu gathered together to form a clan, then there probably wouldn't be any room left in this universe for other civilizations. Everyone might as well pack up and go worship Cthulhu, saving themselves the trouble of fighting. All right. Chen Meng didn't say anything more. He casually tossed Xiao Lu aside, letting it drop to the floor. Go play by yourself. After landing on the control room floor, Xiao Lu immediately rolled toward the back of the train, full of excitement. It looked like it was going to find its little underling, the star-treading fox sword, to play with, just like a kid running off to find their friends right after a full meal. It was just its way of moving. It was clearly so majestic, so why did it like to roll? Moreover, it only ate and never excreted. If this thing were recorded in the classic of mountains and seas, it wouldn't even seem out of place. However, if it really were in the classic of mountains and seas, Xiao Lu's current appearance lacked a bit of intimidation. When not in its eating state, it looked exactly like a moving plush toy, so soft and squishy that it didn't seem aggressive at all. After that, Chen Meng checked the remaining resources. The copper ore was completely untouched, still at 90 trillion units. The iron ore had 29 trillion units left. The next plan was to head home first. Once back, he would upgrade all components to level 200. Then, he would reserve the remaining resources as a strategic stockpile to handle unexpected situations like war or opening wormholes. Right now, iron ore wasn't just a resource for upgrading the train, it was also ammunition. Until he found a prismatic firepower component that consumed copper ore, the planet train setup would remain like this. Most of the prismatic components on the train had now reached level 200. If he upgraded all the remaining low-level components to level 200, it basically wouldn't even cost 1 trillion units of iron ore. They were all small expenses. He'd wait until he got back and upgrade them all at once to keep things simple. By then, the planet train would truly become a level 200 train. From the very beginning, the most resource-hungry component had always been the armor. Once the armor reached level 200, upgrading the other components would just be a matter of convenience. His power was growing almost exponentially. The first time he obtained a massive amount of resources, the armor reached level 100. The second time he obtained a massive amount of resources, the armor reached level 200. The next time he got a massive haul of resources, the armor would head straight for level 500. The level 200 super effect was already a god-tier effect, bringing a qualitative change. So the level 500 super effect would probably be an entirely different world. After returning, he planned to first upgrade a few green and white tier components straight to level 500, just to see what exactly a level 500 super effect was and what form it took. Right now, his resources were abundant, completely enough for him to run a few of these burning money for fun experiments. The next moment, the colossal planet train suddenly shook violently, then began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye, until it completely disappeared from space, transforming into a brooch that appeared right on Chen Meng's chest. At this moment, Chen Meng was wearing clothes produced by his own train, carrying a refrigerator, and free-falling in space. The level 200 clothing production line allowed him to operate freely in space for a short period. Similar to a sealed spacesuit, it could provide oxygen, maintain internal pressure, and resist radiation. This feeling is truly unique. Chen Meng floated in the middle of space, looking around in all directions, his expression slightly dazed as he muttered. This was the first time he had left the train and floated in space without any propulsion equipment on him, just appearing nakedly in the vast expanse of space like this. Even though his clothes maintained his body temperature, he could still feel a bone-chilling sense of loneliness and cold. There were no planets around. There used to be, but Xiao Lu had eaten them all. The nearest planet was extremely far away, so far that he couldn't even feel himself moving. His vision was completely distorted. There were no stars, only cold planetary silhouettes, the traces of distant stars working their hardest to shine. Direction had lost all meaning. Up, down, left, right no longer existed. The only thing that made him feel like he was falling was perhaps the surface of a very distant planet slowly magnifying at an incredibly sluggish pace. There was no sound around him. It was terrifyingly quiet, like watching a silent film. If he didn't have the planet train to rely on, Floating in this environment for a while would have caused his mind to collapse long before his body was destroyed. Thanks to that reliance, he was able to barely keep his composure and quietly enjoy the scene before him, even though he couldn't entirely shake off a sense of panic. For those without a train, if placed in his current situation, it would probably be very hard to muster the mood for sightseeing. He suddenly felt that the train civilization format was truly a great path. It allowed human civilization, despite lacking any innate racial talents, to take a detour and overtake others. Otherwise, expecting humanity to conquer the universe on their own would truly be a myth. The Zerg had their own racial cheats, the Void Behemoths had theirs, and even the Earth Spirits were no exception. Only the human race had nothing, completely empty-handed. But the strange thing was, despite having nothing, the human race was still a major faction in the universe. This truly defied common sense. Out of the 3 highest-tier civilizations he had encountered so far, 2 of them were human civilizations. Even the mechanical civilization, despite its name, was fundamentally a human civilization. It was just more deeply mechanized, having researched the train civilization format more thoroughly. After a while, he stopped enjoying the view, mainly because it was too cold, so cold it was unbearable. He immediately opened the refrigerator next to him and climbed right inside. In that instant, his entire body vanished from the spot, leaving only the lonely refrigerator floating in space. He couldn't take this refrigerator with him. He could only leave it floating here. If it wasn't destroyed by something in the short term, he could still use this refrigerator to return to this location later. But if it was destroyed, the next time he wanted to come back, his only option would be to open a wormhole. And this refrigerator wasn't cheap at all. A single one cost 500 million units of iron ore. Now, basically everywhere he went, he would casually drop a refrigerator when leaving, so he wouldn't need to use a wormhole the next time he came back. Directly using the Planet Train brand refrigerator wormhole, it was efficient, free, and discreet. Especially after obtaining the special item, the Hell Brooch, he could now carry the entire Planet Train on his person. The final flaw of the refrigerator was considered fixed. Before, only a person could pass through. Now, even the train could go through. It was just a pity that the previous experiment failed, otherwise it would have been even more perfect. Last time, he had fired a cannon shot into the refrigerator, intending for the attack to pass through and strike the other side, but the actual result wasn't great. Even so, he always felt there was still a chance. He was just missing something. If he could pull this off, his attack methods would become even more diverse. Enemies facing him would definitely have a massive headache. After that, the Planet Train reappeared in Star System 27 of the Casa Civilization Federation. Chen Meng sat in his chair, beginning to inventory the loot he had brought back from the previous auction. Among them, one item caught his eye the most. It was the hidden auction item, a tier even higher than the Hell Brooch. It was a train ultimate skill called Instant Armament. Back when he was on the twin planets of the Casa Civilization, aside from casually robbing some resources, he had also dropped by the auction house and brought back a few little toys. And this one was clearly the most interesting. The Hell Brooch was one of them. Besides that, the armament ring was also a pretty good item. This was a special carriage skill. The effect was very simple. Upon activation, the entire carriage would transform at extreme speed. In the blink of an eye, it would turn into a massive armed mecha, retaining all the original defense and attack capabilities of the carriage. The front of the carriage would be located in the chest area, serving as the control room. Very overpowered and very badass. A true instant armament. But to be blunt, practically speaking, this skill was mostly just for showing off. There probably weren't many situations where it would actually be needed, because transforming from a carriage into a mecha didn't fundamentally increase its power, it just changed its form. Of course, last time in the peace-seeking civilization, he had seen something called the Mecha Master Tournament. If he had the Planet Train transform and directly piloted it into the competition, winning the championship would be as easy as cheating. It was just that he wasn't particularly interested in mechas, so he couldn't be bothered to care. Not bad. Chen Meng pursed his lips, then stood up and went into the adjacent bathroom to wash up for a bit before returning to bed to sleep. He hadn't slept in a very long time. The major issues that needed handling were all done, and right now, inside the Planet Train, it could be said to be absolutely safe. Whether it was the Zerg civilization or the Kasa civilization, it would be very difficult for them to threaten him. He could finally get a peaceful night's sleep. As for everything else, he'd figure it out after he woke up. Kasa Civilization Federation, Star System 27. The planet train drifted lazily in space. After a long period of development, its internal layout had undergone significant changes. Most of the original residents who had followed the planet train, not the ones who joined later, had basically all moved out. They had settled on the Shuelon planet. Only a portion of the residents who worked directly on the planet train still lived here. After all, the living conditions on the Shuelon planet were much better than on the planet train. The Shuelon planet, after being terraformed, had become the most habitable planet in the entire Kasa Civilization Federation, bar none. If one had to make a comparison, the other habitable planets were basically like mature, middle-aged women, while the Shuelon planet was like a girl who had just turned 20, youthful, yet carrying an indescribable allure that made it impossible to look away. Everyone had also found jobs suited to themselves. Morning. Good morning. A group of men wearing work uniforms chatted and laughed as they walked out of the wormhole connecting the Shuelon planet and the planet train, greeting each other as they headed toward the cyber mine. The scene was quite lively. Inside the carriages, people occasionally passed by. Right now, the planet train wasn't too crowded, and the permanent population wasn't large. Hey, good morning. In carriage number 10, Zhang Yiren stood in front of the film studio, his face full of smiles, greeting everyone he met. Just then, Lao Zhu walked over carrying a stack of documents. He looked at him and smiled. Looks like the box office revenue isn't bad, huh? You're that happy? It's all right. It's all right. Zhang Yiren grinned broadly. As long as it pays the bills. Mainly, it's because Master Meng's direction was spot on. Oh, by the way, Carriage Chief Zhu, did you come looking for me specifically? Yeah. Lao Zhu nodded, handing him the stack of documents. These contain some core values that need to be promoted. Make sure to weave them into your next movie. Your influence isn't small nowadays. A lot of people love watching the movies you make. They even call you the strongest new generation director of the post-apocalyptic era. You flatter me. Zhang Yiren looked a bit embarrassed. Come to think of it, I'm the only director around right now. Strongest what? Come on. Lao Zhu waved his hand, saying no more, and continued walking toward the rear carriages. He still had to find Zhu Li for some personal matters. Planet Train, carriage number 4, high-end female talent zone. In this carriage, there were originally only 2 women, Ji Chu and Yin Yao, arranged to meet Chun Meng's physiological needs. Now, there were 8 more. All of them were fairy maidens meticulously cultivated for years by the 8 major factions of the Xuanwu civilization. Each one possessed an outstanding temperament. From their looks and demeanor to their conduct, they almost entirely overshadowed Ji Chu and Yin Yao. These were top-tier beauties who were well-versed in the arts of the bedchamber but had never actually practiced them. Especially their temperament. Their cultivated bodies were free of impurities. It was an effect that Ji Chu couldn't achieve no matter how many times she used the medical recovery pod. Their skin was fair, rosy, and soft, exuding a faint fragrance. They were true peerless beauties. Currently, there were 10 such women in the carriage. The 8 newcomers had gone from being slightly resistant at first to gradually becoming numb and bewildered. Since they were very young, they had known that their future was to be offered by their sex to a man who was said to be capable of saving the Xuanwu civilization and turning the tides of fate. Their cultivation and studies had always revolved around the zither, chess, calligraphy, painting, and all sorts of other skills. When they were brought to the planet train, they still felt some resistance in their hearts. After all, they had never even met the man. They didn't know what he looked like. They only knew this was the joint decision of the 8 great sects. It was also their destined fate. But soon after, they realized something was wrong. It seemed they were being ignored. Master Meng had absolutely no intention of paying them any attention, let alone having children with them. He couldn't even be bothered to show up. This made them start doubting their own charm. For all these years, they had been secretly trained by the female elders of the Joyous Union sect. When it came to bedroom affairs, even though they hadn't practiced, they had mastered the theory to the point of knowing every detail by heart. It was just that they had no opportunity to apply it. It was exactly like memorizing the textbook but never having a practical lab class. Ji Chu sat absent-mindedly at the edge of the carriage, looking at the breathtaking scenery outside the window. The vast universe always held an indescribable beauty, like that pale yellow dust cloud in the distance. She didn't know how they formed. She only knew they were beautiful to look at. So beautiful that they easily made one forget the passage of time. She really liked it. But Master Meng hadn't sought her out in a very long time. So long that she felt like she was about to turn to stone. The planet train was developing at a breakneck pace, yet their carriage seemed forgotten, with no one checking in on them. She had tried finding other ways to prove her worth, like asking for a job, but when she brought it up to Lao Zhu, she was immediately rejected. The implication was very clear. She didn't need to work. Right at that moment, one of the 8 fairy maidens stood up, walked over to Ji Chu, and asked cautiously, "Sister Chu, has Master Meng encountered some sort of obstacle? Our sect has a remedy for this kind of thing." "No." Ji Chu glared at her. "You're overthinking it. He simply doesn't care to look at you. That's all. Even if there really was a problem, the planet train has far more treatment methods than your sect's, and they're much more effective." She had to admit that the woman in front of her completely overshadowed her in both temperament and looks. This left her with absolutely no mood to throw a tantrum. She also couldn't help but admit that she would very likely gradually become invisible in this carriage. In a few years, she'd move to the Shuelon planet, become an ordinary person, and live out the rest of her life. Peaceful, but faded. Carriage number 2, Mecha Research Center. Chi Kushio stood at the experimental bench, continuously testing various projects. He didn't plan on creating an overly complex component blueprint. For now, he just needed a simple start. With a good beginning, the subsequent steps would be much easier. Beside him were a few robots assisting with the operations. On the screen, various data continuously scrolled by, all results generated by the research chips. On the unnamed planet left behind by the mechanical civilization, they had acquired a large number of research chips. This caused their progress to skyrocket. All the calculations were handed over to Xiao AI, relying on her terrifying deductive capabilities. Deduction failed. Xiao AI shook her head, looking at the red exclamation mark on the screen. Cannot form a blueprint. Parameters are incorrect. Readjust. Crafting a component wasn't hard. For example, a refrigerator or a bicycle. But compressing it into a base component blueprint and getting it recognized by the universe's rules was extremely troublesome. It required constant parameter adjustments and calculations. You could imagine this process as taking an irregular octagonal prism and tweaking every single angle until it perfectly fit into a fixed slot. Only when it slotted in successfully would the base blueprint be born. The truly difficult part wasn't this process, but rather how to craft a component that was actually useful enough. For example, the Doppler radar or the A-cannon energy main cannon. To get the base blueprint, you first had to build the component itself, and those were massive engineering projects. By comparison, making a bicycle was indeed much easier. They had already built the bicycle. They were just stuck on the slotting step. For civilizations with a solid foundation, this step was very easy. But for a civilization starting from scratch like theirs, it required countless experiments. Only when they grasped the corresponding parameters for different tiers of components could they be considered to have a true foundation. After that, they wouldn't stumble at this step anymore. The beginning is always the hardest part of any endeavor. Oh, Xiao AI suddenly paused and turned to walk toward the space portal. The dark side of Mineral Planet number 1 has finally been fully mined. You keep busy here. I'll go bring that batch of ore out. This mineral planet was the first planet they encountered after leaving the Shuelon planet. It was also the first high-tier resource source that helped the planet train truly step into the universe. Back then, the dark side couldn't be mined because the environment was too harsh. Master Meng had brought it into the space portal, using the planetary cabin to terraform the environment before slowly mining it. As time passed, with a significant increase in the number of mining robots, they had finally mined the whole thing. One couldn't help but sigh in realization. For a newly emerged civilization, if they hadn't encountered a mineral planet like this right after leaving the Shuelon planet, then embarking on an interstellar journey would have been nearly impossible. They simply wouldn't have had enough resources to go any further. The universe was infinitely vast. Even if you traveled for thousands or tens of thousands of years, you wouldn't see the end of it. Of course, that was under the condition that you had enough resources to keep going. If your resources were insufficient, the universe wouldn't allow you to take even a single step further. You would just be trapped on your own planet, forever unable to enter the interstellar era. A few hours later, Chen Meng woke up. In the dim light of the carriage room, he sat up from the bed and looked out through the floor-to-ceiling window, where the twinkling stars were scattered across space, so clear it felt like he could reach out and touch them. He let out a soft breath, quickly washed up, and returned to his seat. He lit a cigarette and casually opened the train's log. This was a habit he had maintained for a very long time, even though now, the log barely contained any important information. After all, there was no way a monster would be bored enough to attack his train while he was sleeping. But a habit was a habit. Besides the log, he also casually browsed the Casa news and the newspapers of a few major civilizations in Galaxy 27 to keep up with the local situation. Chen Meng propped his feet up on the control panel, leaned back in his chair, and held the remote, quickly scrolling through each news report on the large screen beside him. Most of it was just trivial gossip. For example, the beautiful Empress Gao Yale officially announced her marriage yesterday to the 78-year-old martial arts superstar Zhang Kaida, leaving countless fans bewildered. Why would the Empress marry an older man while in the prime of her life? Is this true love? Entertainment news. Even in an interstellar civilization, this stuff still existed. After all, actors had always been an indispensable link in human society since ancient times. It was just that their status in the current era had been elevated to a very high level. Many people who chase idols aren't actually that fanatic. They just find all sorts of excuses for themselves, like hard work, talent, or natural gifts. But at the core, it's just an inner emptiness. They need something to fill the void, so they choose an idol. What they're chasing isn't the star, but the ideal image of themselves in their own minds. In interstellar civilizations, the status of actors doesn't seem low at all. It's just that this news headline makes Chen Meng feel that the professionals need to refine their craft. Back in his old world, a headline like this wouldn't even meet the standard. For example, shocking. 28-year-old gorgeous empress marries 78-year-old martial emperor. Late-night secret photos leaked. By the fourth pic, you'll be weak in the knees. Or, the truth behind the age gap marriage. Gao Yali drunkenly reveals bed skills far beyond imagination. Just casually pulling one of those out would absolutely crush that headline. If you don't know the three basic elements of journalism, exposure, controversy, and discussion, then what are you even doing in the news? Such amateur work. However, Chen Meng narrowed his eyes slightly. A piece of news mixed in that chaotic pile caught his attention. At the end of wormhole number 2719, an apocalyptic planet has been discovered. Countless explorers are flocking there. An apocalyptic planet. That was exactly the state the aqua blue planet had once gone through. In the eyes of civilized federations, such planets usually hid massive amounts of wealth. Like Murphy stones, because a planet undergoing an apocalypse would generate quite a bit of this resource. Besides that, there were all sorts of special items, and most importantly, the galactic map. Some apocalyptic planets retained a lot of the mechanical civilization's legacy, and the galactic map was the most valuable thing among them. As long as you got it and found a strong enough auction house to sell it, you could get rich overnight. It'd be more than enough to live comfortably for a lifetime. This wormhole number 2719 happened to be a rare two-way wormhole. Among the many wormholes the Casa civilization opened for free this time, most were one-way. You could only go in, not come back, and had to wait until after the war to return together. Two-way wormholes were extremely rare, and 2719 just so happened to be one of them. Chen Meng quickly swiped through a few attached photos in the news. They were all shots of train captains looking ecstatic after a successful harvest. Very quickly, he decided to join the fun and check it out. Wormhole 2719 was located next to the mother planet of the Cilantro civilization in Galaxy 27. He shook his head, helplessly confirmed the coordinates, and pushed the joystick, sending the train hurtling toward the Cilantro civilization. Just hearing this name made it sound pungent. Cilantro civilization, Scallion civilization. If a peppercorn civilization pops up tomorrow, you could throw them all together and make a hot pot civilization. Not long after, the Star Cruiser approached the cilantro civilization. But just as Chen Mang was about to keep moving straight toward the wormhole entrance, he paused. The Doppler radar screen clearly showed a massive gathering of life forms belonging to the Scallion civilization down on the cilantro civilization. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to change course and drop by the cilantro civilization first. He knew the Scallion civilization had been destroyed, with only Li Gongzi lucky enough to survive. If he could bring these people from the Scallion civilization back, then they might still have a chance to rebuild their civilization in the future. At least they wouldn't go completely extinct in the universe. Even though Li Gongzi hadn't shown much value on the train yet, he was still someone following him, and he was Xiao Lu's owner. Logically and emotionally, if he could help out in passing, he wouldn't refuse. Not to mention, he now had the strength to do so. Half an hour later, the Star Cruiser slowly landed on the cilantro civilization and headed toward a large manor situated in the middle of a prairie. Li Gongzi, Chen Mang said calmly from his seat. There are quite a few people from the Scallion civilization in the manor ahead. I estimate about 3,000. With this number, you guys might still have a chance to restore your civilization later. Take some men and go negotiate. See what you can do. If you can buy them back with money, do it as discreetly as possible. If that doesn't work, then we take action directly. That's highly unlikely. Li Gongzi shook his head, his expression a bit grim. The cilantro civilization and the Scallion civilization have always been mortal enemies. We don't eat cilantro, and they don't eat scallions. Plus, both sides absolutely despise the smell of the other. Under this irreconcilable conflict, the relationship between our two civilizations has always been terrible. They definitely saw that the Scallion civilization was destroyed and took the chance to snatch our people, turning them into slaves for revenge. Just go take a look first. Li Gongzi didn't say anything else. He immediately led a group of armed robots. A large scallion perched on his head and slowly marched toward the manor. His eyes were filled with fury and indignation. The Scallion civilization had perished, yet the survivors were still being humiliated like this. How could he not be furious? They didn't encounter any obstacles along the way and smoothly entered the manor. Even the main gates were wide open. Just as Li Gongzi was wondering why a manor would have such lax defenses, an old man leaning on a cane, leading a group of guards, slowly walked out from deep within the manor. Fei Lao. Li Gongzi froze for a moment, a flash of respect in his eyes, but he still tried to suppress his anger. He said hoarsely, Fei Lao, the Scallion civilization is gone. Thank you for taking in my people. I want to take them away. Name your price. He had only ever seen this old man on TV before. He was the former leader of the cilantro civilization, and the current leader was his son. This was a figure with immense power. Even though the two civilizations had deep conflicts, it was undeniable that this old man was the one who turned the cilantro civilization into a tourist planet. The Scallion civilization had two habitable planets. One was the mother planet, and the other was the scallion farming planet. The cilantro civilization was the same, a mother planet and a cilantro farming planet. Fei Lao capitalized on the internet debate about whether to eat cilantro or not, successfully turning the cilantro farming planet into a famous check-in spot. It attracted countless people to take photos and post captions like, "Finally, a world full of cilantro." In Li Gongzi's heart, Fei Lao had always been a role model to strive toward. He had also wanted to turn the Scallion civilization's planet into a tourist destination, which was why he partnered with the Jimei travel agency. It was just that right when things were starting to look up, an unexpected disaster completely destroyed his planet. Fei Lao didn't speak immediately. He just stood there, looking at Li Gongzi with a vague expression, the cilantro on his head fluttering in the wind. After a long time, he slowly said, I recognize you. You're the eldest son of the Li family. Years ago, when I spoke with your father, he was still holding you in his arms. In the blink of an eye, you've grown this big? What a pity. Your father was a good man. After a moment of silence, he gently waved his hand. The Scallion civilization is gone, and so is your father. You must shoulder the responsibilities of a civilization's leader. That position doesn't just represent power, it also means duty. Rights and duties always go hand in hand. No one can just enjoy the rights without bearing the responsibilities. After the Scallion civilization was destroyed, I was never happy about it. If the lips are gone, the teeth will be cold. Both you and I understand this logic. The strength of the Scallion civilization and the Cilantro civilization were always about the same. Over the years, despite constant friction, it was mostly a clash of values. There was never a major war, nor any large-scale casualties. It's just that the values of our Cilantro civilization make it really hard to accept that some people don't eat cilantro. These survivors of the Scallion civilization were temporarily taken in by me. Now that you're here, just take them all. No need to pay. I'm not a slave trader. Li Gongzi's lips trembled slightly. He bowed deeply, his eyes red. Thank you. But after just that one sentence, he hesitated for a long time before continuing. This is the biggest difference between the Scallion civilization and the Cilantro civilization. Our Scallion civilization loves eating scallions, but we don't force everyone else to eat them. But your Cilantro civilization wants to force everyone to eat cilantro. So what if we force them? The old man was surprisingly calm. If the Cilantro civilization were a level 3 civilization, then all civilizations, even the Zerg civilization, would have to eat cilantro. Whoever doesn't eat it gets locked up for 15 days. Hearing this, one couldn't help but wonder, is this a civilization or a force-feeding camp? The old man waved his hand. All right, go. That train behind you doesn't look ordinary. You must have found your own fortune. The world is getting more and more chaotic. It's a stage for you young folks now. Old people like us can't keep up anymore. The minor incident ended swiftly. There was no clash between the two sides. It was actually quite harmonious. Li Gongzi led the remaining 3,000-plus people of the Scallion civilization back to the Star Cruiser, temporarily settling them in the Aqua Blue Planet section. Just seeing his people, each with a scallion on their head, made his eyes instantly turn red and well up with tears. Finally, he felt like he had a home. He had thought that in this vast universe, he would be alone forever. Captain Zhu, please pass on my thanks to Qin Meng. Li Gongzi knelt down, looking at Lao Zhu beside him, his voice hoarse and eyes red. Yeah, get up. Lao Zhu helped him up, sighing as he looked at the scene before him. It'd be great if we could pull in some people from the Cilantro civilization later. I feel like sooner or later, the Star Cruiser is going to gather a whole hot pot civilization set. Doesn't sound too bad. Lao Zhu got curious again. Hey, Li Gongzi, your two civilizations might look a bit different on the outside, but you're both fundamentally human. Can you marry each other? Would you give birth to a kid that's half cilantro and half scallion? No. Why not? Li Gongzi shyly lowered his head. We people of the Scallion civilization. The scallion on our head is a sensitive organ. It's an indispensable part of foreplay. As for the people of the Cilantro civilization, they don't eat scallions. Their organ is similar, and we don't eat cilantro. Lao Zhu looked up at the scallion standing straight on Li Gongzi's head. He held his tongue for a long time before saying, Actually, I don't eat scallions either. I know, Captain Zhu. You don't need to explain. I really don't eat them. I really know. Even if I ate them before, I'm definitely never eating them again. Yeah. Fully you and the others were also moved watching this scene. Only when you've experienced the destruction of your civilization can you understand just how painful and heartwarming it is to reunite with your people in the vast universe. Fully you felt this the deepest. He had let go of the Philia pirate group, which he had poured his heart and soul into. He wanted to join the Star Cruiser just because his people were on the train, so he'd know he wasn't alone anymore. Even though he was much more exhausted every day than before, the feeling of building a city that belonged to his civilization still made him happy. There was just one thing that annoyed him. Hey, isn't this the city of our goblin civilization? Why are the Scallion civilization people being put in here? Captain Zhu said it's just temporary. They'll move out soon. You need to talk to Captain Zhu tactfully about this. Tell them to move out as soon as possible. The proud goblin civilization will not share a city with the foolish Scallion civilization. I know. Also, from now on, call me boss. Boss. Sympathy is one thing, but sympathy is a matter of the heart. Moving into our house is a whole different story. Fuliu had worked so hard to build all these new houses for the future newborns of the Goblin civilization, not for the people of the Scallion civilization. With this minor issue resolved, the Star Cruiser resumed its journey. Not long after, it passed through wormhole 2719, arriving at a location 3,000 light-years away. This place was still tens of thousands of light-years away from the Zerg civilization's territory. It was a buffer zone between the two civilizations, basically free of danger. The main combat zone was currently still within the Zerg civilization's territory. How far the fighting had progressed was temporarily unclear. The news only reported the outbreak of war, not the results. But based on the Doppler radar, he could roughly guess that both sides were still probing each other. And it was clear that the Zerg civilization was indeed fighting another civilization on the other side, leaving them momentarily flustered and unable to cover both fronts. This was a logistics transit station. That apocalyptic planet wouldn't have been discovered by anyone normally, but there were quite a few people who registered as free mercenaries in the Casa Civilization Federation. Half went to the one-way wormholes, and the other half went to the two-way wormholes. They didn't jump further, nor did they head to the battlefield. They just loitered at the end of the two-way wormholes, hoping to stumble upon some lucky break. And they actually did. That was exactly how this apocalyptic planet was discovered. The Star Cruiser shot out of the wormhole and sped straight in one direction. At a glance, countless trains merged into a massive river of steel, roaring forward. A lot of people had come, but strangely, it didn't feel crowded at all. After all, the universe was too vast. This poor civilization, Chen Meng sighed softly. This civilization was already going through an apocalypse, and now it was being scoured all over again. How many survivors would even be left in the end? It was really hard to say. If it had been him in the past running into something like this, he probably would have lost all his patience too. The apocalypse was exhausting enough. Getting hit with a combo on top of it, you might as well just give up on living. The lowest level trains here had about the same strength he did back on the Aqua Blue planet. Anyone who dared to come exploring couldn't be a nobody. People who dared to pan for gold in the universe had to have a few tricks up their sleeves. Chen Meng didn't drive too fast. He wasn't planning on harvesting anything anyway. Murphy stones and the galactic map didn't have much use for him. Even if there were Murphy stones, there wouldn't be many, and there was only one galactic map. He didn't believe he was lucky enough to pick it up, and even if he did, he already had one. Its only use would be to sell it for a good amount of iron ore. About 7 hours later, the Star Cruiser finally arrived at this apocalyptic planet. A tiny, pitiful planet orbiting a star. At this moment, the outside of the planet was packed with countless trains, practically surrounding the entire planet. Let me take a look. Chen Meng opened the hunting radar. Looking at the displayed information, the strongest train on this planet was only level 17. That meant the apocalypse hadn't happened too long ago. When it came to checking train component levels, the hunting radar was definitely more specialized. As for the surrounding trains, they were just average. Nothing worth noting. Levels around 20 were still easy to judge, but once it hit 27 and above, it was very hard to guess their exact strength. For example, right now, the Star Cruiser was level 27, not yet 28. It hadn't been upgraded in a long time. Just looking at levels, there were quite a few trains in this area higher than his, but in terms of actual strength, even if they all ganged up, it might not even be enough for a warm-up. Sometimes, looking at the level number was like looking at a box. You only knew what was inside when you opened it. Upgrade conditions: consume 200,000 units of level 3 iron ore, have over 5,000 survivors on the train, and total component levels must exceed 550. Must have at least one pink or rainbow component above level 50, and must leave the current planet. Chen Meng glanced at the conditions and decided that once this was over, he'd do a massive upgrade, pushing it as far as it could go. He figured hitting level 35 shouldn't be a problem. He wanted to see if it would unlock any new functions or component blueprints. Right at that moment, Chen Meng suddenly froze. A bizarre look flashed in his eyes. Something isn't right. The survivors on this planet gave him an extremely strange feeling. He switched to the Doppler radar, selected a survivor settlement, and continuously zoomed in on the image. This was a human planet. On the screen, a person gradually filled the frame, clear enough to see their veins. The person's eyes were lifeless like a zombie's. They sat blankly on a bench, their veins bulging, looking so clear it was terrifying. But it wasn't just one person. Chen Meng kept changing the viewing angle, and all the survivors were like that. Dead silent. Were these even humans anymore? The residents of this planet looked exactly like zombies. This planet didn't look like a place where the living resided either. The thing was, it seemed the other trains were completely unaware. Then this definitely wasn't the doing of those explorers. A possibility suddenly flashed in his mind. How did the apocalypse form? From the influence of the Zerg civilization. The Zerg civilization released a massive amount of Zerg eggs into the universe. Whichever planet the Zerg eggs landed on would face an apocalypse. If that planet also received the gift of the mechanical civilization, it would have train vehicles. They could seal the monsters in different areas, giving that civilization a chance to survive. But if they didn't receive the gift, they were basically marching straight into extinction. The Zerg civilization had various motives. One of them was scouting for mineral resource veins. If there were high-level resource veins nearby worth their time, they would use the coordinates of these Zerg eggs to open a wormhole and send their army. In other words, every apocalyptic planet was actually a potential wormhole opening point for the Zerg civilization. And the humans on this planet gave him the feeling that this planet had failed to withstand the apocalypse and had long been wiped out. The Zerg civilization disguised it perfectly, then intentionally leaked the news to lure a massive number of explorers over. After that, they'd open a wormhole and drop their army right on top of them. The moment the thought crossed his mind, Chen Meng didn't hesitate at all. He immediately turned around and sped off into the distance, losing all interest in exploring. He didn't want to get dragged into the war like this. With the Star Cruiser's strength, he was fully capable of intervening in the war right now, but he wanted to step in on his own terms, not be forced into it. To him, those were two completely different things. It was just that he didn't understand. The ones who came to explore were all just adventurers. Did the Zerg civilization go through all this trouble just to kill a bunch of explorers? It didn't sound logical. Setting such a massive trap just to catch a few small fry was way too much wasted effort. What was the goal? What confused Chen Meng even more was, could the Zerg broodmother really be smart enough to set up a trap like this? He had always thought the Zerg civilization was just a bunch of monsters acting on instinct. Like, if they're hungry, they bite. If they see something, they charge. Who would have thought they knew how to set traps? He had definitely underestimated them. A few minutes later, the Star Cruiser was flying at top speed, having already put a huge distance between them. But right at that moment, a wormhole suddenly appeared ahead. No, dozens of wormholes appeared all at once. The Star Cruiser was moving too fast to dodge and crashed right into one. The moment he entered, Chen Meng's expression changed. Crap, this is a two-way wormhole. Once the train rushed in, there was almost no turning back. Even in a two-way wormhole, you couldn't just reverse course. He could even clearly see a massive number of Zerg motherships flashing past inside the wormhole. Neither side said a word, but he could still sense their confusion. It was like they were thinking, where did this guy drop in from? Good Lord. Chen Meng never thought he'd enter the Zerg civilization's territory like this. Running away, only to accidentally dive straight into their lair. This was straight out of a horror comedy. Very quickly, the wormhole reached its end. The Star Cruiser shot out like a mechanical dragon, appearing in an unfamiliar region of space. Surrounded by countless planets, the space above was densely packed with Zerg motherships. A mechanical train like his suddenly appearing here stood out so much that they couldn't pretend not to see it even if they wanted to. This place was the Zerg broodmother's nest, a place not even Army Commander Li had ever set foot in, yet here he was, the absolute core of the Zerg territory. Chen Meng's mouth twitched. Taking advantage of the fact that all the Zerg motherships and countless monsters floating in space were still stunned, he immediately steered the Star Cruiser right back into the wormhole behind him. He moved incredibly fast, so fast that before anyone could even say, he was gone. Only when he was back on the journey through the wormhole did he breathe a sigh of relief. What the hell was that? How did I run into them so fast? It was just that before leaving, while the Zerg hadn't reacted yet, he still casually tossed a few refrigerators out of the train. Inside the Zerg civilization's wormhole, Chen Meng glanced back. Seeing no army chasing him, he finally felt truly at ease. His guess wasn't wrong. That apocalyptic planet was indeed a trap set by the Zerg civilization. Even though he still didn't know how they did it, or why the survivors on that planet had turned into half-dead things like zombies. He also didn't know why the Zerg intentionally leaked the news to lure explorers over, much less what their ultimate goal was. But this reminded him of one thing. He needed to prepare a specific component to deal with sudden situations like this. Logically speaking, the universe was infinitely vast. The probability of a wormhole suddenly appearing right in front of a moving train was about the same as standing on the aqua-blue planet, throwing a rock forward, and having it fly all the way around the equator to hit you in the back of the head. The odds were so small it was laughable. But as people always say, no matter how small the probability, it'll happen one day. Like just now. Didn't it just happen? Good thing the Zerg civilization wasn't prepared. If they had set up an inescapable net on the other side, even if he could escape, he would have paid a heavy price. The Star Cruiser exited the wormhole, glanced into the distance where chaotic beams of light and explosive sparks occasionally flashed, then turned and continued hurtling into the void. This area was a bit dangerous right now. He didn't want to expose himself. But it wasn't like nothing good came out of it. The moment he got close to the Zerg's main base earlier, the enemy search radar had finished scanning all the data of the army guarding the wormhole entrance. According to the radar data, the Zerg civilization's combat units were basically divided into two types, Zerg motherships and Zerg monsters. The motherships were massive warships with surfaces like flesh and blood, kind of like flesh and blood trains. They could also upgrade components, acting as a different form of civilization, but fundamentally they were quite similar to the train civilization. Both used nuclear energy to enhance components. The army stationed at the wormhole entrance had a total of 878 motherships. Each one had level 100 defensive armor and level 150 main cannon power. This strength was not weak at all. Chen Mang didn't know the exact strength of the Kasa civilization's military, so it wasn't convenient to compare just yet. But at the very least, it would be hard for them to break his defenses, and they didn't pose a major threat yet. He also didn't know what percentage of the Zerg civilization's total strength these motherships represented. Besides that, there were countless Zerg monsters floating in space, looking like starry sky behemoths. Each one had a massive body, tens of meters wide. Of course, massive was compared to normal creatures. Compared to Xiaolu, they were just like ants. These tough-looking monsters were around level 120, with the strongest reaching level 150. With the current information, this Zerg army couldn't defeat him. Even if they all teamed up, they couldn't beat him. His defensive armor was too high. It'd be very hard for them to break through. Level 200 armor was enough for him to run rampant in the universe. Moreover, I also realized that the Zerg civilization's main cannon level wasn't that high. I don't think it's because they lack resources. Because if they gathered all the resources used to build 878 motherships and poured them into a single one, they could definitely push the main cannon to at least level 200. Yet they stopped at level 150. It seems this is the most cost-effective level. After all, the defensive armor of most other civilizations is low. Having a main cannon that's too high level wouldn't add much meaning. Just being slightly better, without exceeding by too much, is the optimal choice. Classic business mindset. As long as it's enough, why waste resources showing off? How many Murphy stones must this have cost? Chen Mang sat in the Star Cruiser's pilot seat, looking into the distance where the battle was raging fiercely. By now, the Zerg army had practically slaughtered the explorers and was continuing its forward assault. Ahead was that two-way wormhole. That wormhole was one of the Kasa civilization's strategic resource transport channels, part of their logistics supply line. If this wormhole was destroyed, the Kasa civilization's logistics efficiency would definitely drop by a margin. If the Zerg civilization's target was this wormhole, I find it very reasonable. But why did they have to lure the explorers here? The Kasa civilization had almost no troops stationed at this wormhole exit, only a few workers. Just as the Zerg army aimed their main cannons at the wormhole, preparing to fire. Boom. Chen Mang didn't hesitate and immediately pressed a button on the control panel. The Star Cruiser hovered in space. The Arcano main cannon locked straight onto the Zerg army. A blazing red beam instantly shot out, swallowing several Zerg motherships in the blink of an eye. and melting them on the spot. Without stopping, he fired 3 more beams, blanketing all the remaining motherships. In just an instant, the Zerg civilization's vanguard army was completely wiped out, leaving no survivors. For shots, the universe suddenly fell dead silent. Each of his light cannon shots had an attack intensity of level 150, crushing straight through the Zerg mothership's level 100 defensive energy shields. It was a literal level-crushing strike. With a level gap like this, there was no need for tactics. Just press the button and it's over. Chen Meng looked at the silently exploding debris ahead, glanced at the Doppler radar info again, and then continued driving the train away, leaving as cleanly as if he had never been there. He couldn't let the Zerg civilization easily destroy this logistics supply line. According to the radar, the Kasa civilization was at a disadvantage on the frontal battlefield. He needed to maintain the balance between these two top civilizations to drag the war out a little longer. He needed time to continue developing until both of those civilizations were completely incapable of posing any threat to him. The war shouldn't end this quickly. It was just that he didn't know if the Kasa civilization was too weak or if the Zerg civilization was too ferocious. The Zerg were previously fighting other civilizations and then faced off against the Kasa civilization. They were basically being attacked from both sides. Yet, from initially falling into a disadvantage by surprise, they managed to stand their ground again. 1 against 2? Truly too strong. Perhaps it was because of that strength that many people forgot the Zerg civilization was only a level 2 civilization, not yet promoted to level 3. The Star Cruiser left extremely casually, leaving behind a few surviving explorers sitting in their trains, staring blankly in the direction the ship disappeared. There wasn't any wormhole in that direction. Where was that mysterious ship going? Moreover, their equipment just showed that the attack intensity of those light beams reached level 150. This was a main cannon level that only military trains could possess. So who exactly was that person? No one knew what that ship was thinking, but this scene had caused a massive shock in everyone's hearts. And it was recorded, then quickly spread outward. Fire! Fire! In space, Army Commander Lee stood in the control room, listening to the agitated commands of his subordinates echoing in his ears. He remained calm, hands clasped behind his back, staring straight ahead. The strategic goal of this trip was only one: destroy as many Zerg planets as possible, crush the Zerg's organic vitality, and force them into a two-front war. But he had only known the Zerg through history books and intelligence, never having witnessed them with his own eyes. Even though he knew the Zerg civilization could resurrect and multiply infinitely, actually seeing this scene still gave him the chills. There were no elaborate schemes or strategies. He divided the army into 3 wings, attacking from 3 directions. The army he led formed a horizontal line in space. Hundreds of high-level trains lined up, continuously spewing out massive amounts of firepower, melting the Zerg monsters charging from all sides. No fancy tricks. They had to push deep, and the Zerg wouldn't let them. The battlefield was like an open meat grinder. Resources were being swallowed at a visible rate. Even though supply fleets kept rushing in from behind, carrying massive amounts of resources, but it still wasn't enough. It was literally burning resources like firewood. Commander. The deputy beside him looked anxious. We still haven't found any trace of the antenna worms. The mechanics say the Zerg monsters might have mutated accordingly, evading the detection of this component. In recent years, the Kasa civilization had been groping around in the ruins of the mechanical civilization and had acquired quite a bit of its foundational technology. For example, a type of component specifically designed to detect and destroy antenna worms. The Zerg civilization relied on antenna worms to infinitely resurrect their monsters. So there must be an antenna worm hiding in some corner of this area. If they didn't find it, this battle was no different from using thin mud to block a burst dam. Sooner or later, it would collapse. The resources they were consuming were limited, while the number of Zerg monsters was infinite. They couldn't just stop firing. If they didn't fire, those monsters would charge right up to their trains, and they'd take a severe beating. But if they kept firing, the enemy would just keep resurrecting. No matter how you looked at it, this battle couldn't drag on. Let's give up. Army Commander Lee's expression didn't change much. The fact that the Zerg civilization evolved extremely fast was already within his expectations. He didn't ramble. He just looked at the galactic map and asked softly, "How is the wormhole construction on the other side coming along?" "We've finished surveying the possible construction sites and are preparing to start building." Army Commander Lee breathed a sigh of relief. Once the wormhole was built, the problem would be much simpler. He planned to send someone to find the civilization currently at war with the Zerg civilization, explain the current situation, and then, together with that civilization, go all out and launch a general offensive. Two top-tier civilizations launching a general offensive together. Could the Zerg still withstand it? He didn't know the exact strength of that other civilization, but to be able to hold out against the Zerg for so long, they definitely weren't pushovers. Fighting right on Zerg territory was too much pressure. They had killed who knows how many Zerg monsters, yet the monsters still came like a tidal wave, swarming in, using their own lives to trade for the rate of their resource consumption. Resources flowed like water, vanishing in a flash. This consumption rate was even faster than a corrupt official embezzling funds. It was literally shooting while wincing in pain. After shooting, looking at the empty resource warehouse made you want to cry. Inside the Star Cruiser, Xiao AI had finished exploring the entire unnamed planet left by the mechanical civilization, finding quite a few resources. Among them were documents recording the earliest history of the mechanical civilization. Those were records from a very, very long time ago. The mechanical civilization had lasted for an extremely long time, spanning thousands of years. It was considered a civilization with quite a long legacy. That was enough. In the universe, the lifespan of a civilization capable of interstellar travel was basically only about 1,000 years. During that time, mishandling just a single event could plunge the entire civilization straight into an unsalvageable abyss. In the recorded history of the mechanical civilization, Chun Meng saw a passage like this. Looking at the screen, his eyes narrowed slightly. "I once thought that civilization levels meant nothing. A civilization level is a rank recognized by the rules of the universe. I thought that as long as we strengthened our civilization's power, we didn't need to level up. That way, we could still play the weak to prey on the strong. But later, I realized I was wrong. Civilization levels hold extremely crucial significance. Every time a civilization levels up, its overall strength is significantly enhanced. In the universe, a civilization's level practically represents its overall strength. A level 2 civilization is almost absolutely incapable of rivaling a level 3 civilization, especially when I came into contact with a true God-tier civilization. Only then did I realize our insignificance. Those God-tier civilizations, each one is like an overlord of the universe, occupying the most fertile resource regions in the cosmos. The God-tier civilization I encountered was a level 5 civilization. He was a traveler. He told me many things about the universe. He told me that to upgrade to a level 5 civilization, you first have to find an empty region of space with a range of no less than 10 million light-years, and then relocate the civilization near that area. I asked him why. Was this a rule of the universe? He said no. The universe's rules for upgrading to a level 5 civilization don't include this. But if there isn't an empty region of space around a level 5 civilization, it won't be recognized by other civilizations, and it will lead to many dangers. Moreover, that method is also one of the strongest trump cards of a level 5 civilization, equivalent to nuclear weapons. It's something every level 5 civilization possesses. I asked more carefully, trying to dig for more details. I had never interacted with someone from a God-tier civilization. The mechanical civilization was only a level 2 civilization. To me, a traveler from a level 5 civilization was already a god, a height I could hardly reach. He smiled and asked me, "Do you know what the transcendent effect of a level 200 Arcano main cannon is? It's that the further the light travels, the greater the power." Chen Meng paused for a beat. Of course he knew. Even though the mechanical civilization was only a level 2 civilization, not long ago they had gone all out, spending a massive amount of resources to upgrade an Arcano main cannon to level 200. He had also guessed how to use this effect, firing an Arcano main cannon shot into the empty void of space, right? Just hearing it, You could tell it was a long-range attack where the further it went, the harder it hit. Definitely a high-level trick.